I'd like to call to order the September 9th, 2024 Committee of the Whole regular board meeting of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. If everyone who's able could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone joining us in person this evening and those viewing remotely. The board held an executive session on August 19th regarding personnel and a confidential student matter. Prior to this meeting, we also held an executive session regarding legal, and I'm required to list the case numbers, and there's a lot of numbers, so forgive me, I'll try not to get tongue-tied. Case number 4:22-CV-01336-MWB, case 3240217, case 03221200, case 03231381, case 4:23-CV-01144-MWB, and last, case 2024000050. Additionally, we discussed personnel and student discipline matters. Board members, with an agenda before you, are there any changes? Okay, thanks. I'd like to now call on our board secretary for a roll call of board members.
Dr. Bader?
Here.
Dr. Anderson?
Here.
Ms. Brandt?
Here.
Dr. Buck?
Here.
Dr. Crevecoeur?
Here.
Dr. Demo?
Here.
Ms. Huff?
Here.
Mr. Colby?
Here.
Dr. Miller?
Here.
Thank you. Next up, we'll start with communications and the superintendent update. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Amy. Congratulations to the State High's first mental health clinician, Elizabeth James, for receiving the 2024 Yale Educator Award from the Yale University Office of Undergraduate Admissions. The Yale Educator Recognition Program recognizes outstanding educators from around the nation and world who inspire and support their students to perform at high levels and achieve excellence. Nominated by last year's student government president and current Yale student, Prithi Narayanan, for her counseling and work supporting mental health initiatives. Elizabeth was one of 75 teachers and 20 counselors selected from 320 nominees to receive the award. Thank you, Elizabeth, for all you do to help our students. Additionally, on September 12th, the State College Music Boosters will hold its annual used instrument sale for the district families and the public from 7 to 8:30 p.m. in the Mount Nittany Middle School cafeteria. A tradition for more than 3 decades, the sale helps support the district's award-winning music program by offering affordable choices for students of all ages. To sell an instrument, bring it to Mount Nittany on September 11th between 7 and 8:30 p.m. Please visit the Music Boosters website for details and a pre-registration form. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Since it's early in the school year, our student board representatives have not been appointed as yet, so I'm going to share the student update for this evening. Congratulations to State High FFA chapter for a successful Grange Fair recently. Exhibiting livestock, members collected 24 first places, as well as 1 Supreme Champion, 2 Grand Champion, 2 Reserve Grand Champion, 8 Champion, and 10 Reserve Champion honors. Additionally, Catherine Coopy was crowned as the 2024 alternate Grange Fair Queen. Full individual results are available on the district website. And that concludes our student information. Next up, we have a legislative update. Jackie, do you have anything to share?
I don't have much to share, but I will say that the suggested language to the PSBA legislative platform that we sent to PSBA was accepted, and so we'll get to vote on that. Those of us who are going to be delegates to the delegate meeting will get to vote on that. And also, just as a small update, because I know a few people are interested, there was also language added to the platform for universal lunch, free lunch for students as well, so we'll have an option to vote for that during the delegate meeting as well.
Great, thanks so much. Next up, we have Center Region Council of Governments Liaison Report. Gretchen or Peter?
Do you have anything? I'm just going to share that I attended the Climate Action and Sustainability Committee meeting today. It was earlier this morning, and it's because I'm the COG liaison, and the exact same topic that we will discuss, the PPA, was also discussed in that meeting. So that's all I have.
Okay, thanks. We now have time for public comment. Each individual will be allotted up to 3 minutes for items related to board business that are not a consent or action item this evening. For those items, public comment will be held just prior to voting on that item. If you join us, please state your name and where you reside in the district. Do we have anyone here for public comment?
Jennifer Black, Half Moon Township. And I wanted to confirm that if I have something to say now, I can still say something later on the action item if it's unrelated to what I'm going to say now.
Yeah, action items, yes. Info
Okay.
discussion items, we usually ask people to make statements in advance.
Okay. Excuse me. Through these last 4 months, I've had the opportunity to talk with many administrators, parents, students, and teachers in the district. During my discussions with any friends who also happen to be teachers in the district, one distinct and concerning fact stands out, and that's that the teachers do not feel safe bringing concerns to the school board. The teachers I've spoken to are all in different school buildings and disciplines, but the common thread has been their visceral reaction to my question of, would you feel comfortable talking to the school board about your concerns? I had one teacher tell me, we aren't supposed to say anything that causes the district to be looked at unfavorably. Another teacher told me, I don't think I could do this in public. I could lose my job. A private meeting is different, but not in public. That's dangerous for us. I understand that typically larger concerns are brought up to the district or board through the teachers' union representative. However, when the issue directly involves the child of a school employee and has nothing to do with the educator's position, many teachers are still extremely intimidated and not willing to talk to the school board for fear their job will be in jeopardy. I understand the importance of school employees not openly complaining about district administration or policies. However, there's an important distinction between complaining and sharing a concern. I should hope that we would value all of the members of the district enough to believe that they also would understand this difference. I do not think this is a reflection on the board as a whole, or any one member of the board. I also don't believe it is any specific rule coming from the district. If I am incorrect, I apologize. However, just because there isn't an official rule, there is most definitely an unspoken rule that teachers and school board members are to keep their distance. As a district whose mission it is to ensure every student has opportunities to grow, thrive, and fulfill their potential through caring, responsive education, I think that it's important that after, of course, taking concerns through their proper channels and not getting results, all members of the district, including teachers, should feel comfortable reaching out to the administration and board members. As a district, we need to take a look at our culture, and not just at the building level, but at the district-wide level as well.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else here in person that would like to make public comment? Yes. If you could state your name and where you reside in the district.
My name is Dick Anderson. I'm a resident of Ferguson Township and a longtime resident of State College as well as Ferguson Township. What I have to say is not news. I think most people on the board, but I think it's important that everyone understands what I'm trying to do, and this, believe me, is not for me. The end result here is the kids of our district and really our kids nationally. And we do have the opportunity a week from Wednesday to have a Zoom call with Glenn Thompson in Washington, D.C. Now, Linda Pierce, I don't know if Linda's here or not. I don't think.
Linda retired.
Has been working with me for well over a year on this. And I view it to be very important because it has to do with the ability to hire wage payroll people in districts, and this is nationwide, on a stipend as opposed to time and a half, which is prohibitive in terms of cost. I think it's really important because there's a real need for coaches in this district, in Pennsylvania, and nationwide. And it's an ideal opportunity to make a contact with G.T. Thompson, who I've gotten to know over the years, who is a senior member of the Education Committee in Washington. So what I'm asking for, and certainly CJ is aware, Jackie Huff I've talked to personally about it, Peter I've mentioned it too. I think if I can have some support at this meeting, and I can say that it's not only human resources and me as a constituent, but also someone from administration, from the board, that will just give a statement. And it's a Zoom, so they don't even have to be there that long. They can be there 5 minutes, give a strong statement of how important it is. I think this would be critical. Now, the other thing, am I running out of time? Well, the other thing is officials, and my understanding is, and I haven't been able to get a clarification, that continuing education or community education is not being supported anymore, and that's out because we were working towards getting officials educated. There's a real shortage of officials, again, in Pennsylvania, in districts, and across the nation. So Chris Weekland has done a great job with getting an education program going for kids, all right, juniors and seniors, so they can handle lower level things. But varsity things, JV things, we need officials. And we have a lot of sports nationwide, statewide, district-wise, and we need that, and we're trying to find a way to get a home for this in terms of a classroom. We have other people that will support it. We have our Visitors Bureau that are interested. So again, I want to make you folks aware of it because, again, it's another critical thing.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Do we have other individuals in person who would like to make a public comment? Yes, if you want to come to the podium, share your name and where you reside in the district, please.
Hi, my name is Amy Evanego. I live in Patton Township. I have 2 sons who attend the high school, and I'm starting my 7th year as a para in kindergarten at Grays Woods. I'd like to say thank you to the board members who answered my email last week. I really appreciate the efforts that you're doing for our children. I support Jen Black's idea. At the last meeting, she had some great ideas regarding mental health. And one of the ones, I really liked her earlier analogy of sharing an alert with parents without names of students, letting us know that someone in our child's class has been suffering or that there's some fear that a child might do something to someone else. They may not be ever willing to talk to the counselor, but they may be willing to talk to peers and to parents who are reaching out. This is similar to the contact tracing that she mentioned last time during COVID-19. We didn't know when we knew a child was sick in our cohort or our class. We didn't know the child's name. And I would love to see something like that explored when we're looking at mental health options for our children. And thank you for taking our children's mental health so seriously.
Thank you. Anyone else here in person to make a public comment? Yes, come up to the podium.
Hi,
Hi.
my name is Laura Barthmeyer. I'm a retired SCASA teacher. I live in Ferguson Township. I have a daughter who's a teacher currently and 2 grandchildren in the district. I'm very proud SCASA retiree. I am coming with a thought that perhaps is just so obvious, but sometimes the most obvious things have to be restated in times of careful thought. And as the district considers an extrinsic review of practices and procedures to support our students' mental health and general student support in our schools, I think it has to be remembered that parents are the #1 person that needs to be contacted whenever there's a concern. I have a vivid memory of my daughter entering middle school, and the affect completely changed from elementary school, understandably so. Middle school kids are expected more independence and autonomy and so on. But there was definitely this feeling of parents, you know, you can look in, but don't ask too many questions. There wasn't a feeling of inclusion. Being an elementary school teacher myself, you know, that was always something so important. I recognize the difference in middle school, but I also recognize that's a time of great vulnerability for our children. A lot of risk-taking behaviors happen during that time. There's just a lot of experimentation, and not often direct conversations with parents about this, but more with peers. And teachers and counselors hear and see things at school. And parents have to know about it. I don't know of a single parent who would resist school personnel calling them and saying, we have a concern about your child, and this is what it is. So as we look at all the ways we can get better at supporting students, there's so many things being done already that are great, and I know our district takes it very seriously. I'm very grateful for that. And my own adult children now benefited from it when they were in school here. Let's not forget that parents are the #1 resource to contact. Counseling staff, teachers need to let parents know when something is of concern with their child. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, come up to the podium.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Good evening. My name is Beth Edgar. I'm from Half Moon Township. So first of all, I want to thank you for hearing public comments tonight about some important matters, and I'd like to applaud the steps being taken to help remove the far too lasting negative stigma of mental health, especially with our children. I'd like to add my own observations as a mother of 4, 3 of which have already passed through the middle school level at Park Forest Middle School. Although we've had some wonderful interactions, we've sadly had far more challenges when it comes to counseling processes within the district. In elementary school, as mentioned before, our children are exposed to age-appropriate programming on a regular basis and encouraged to work out issues as they arise. As they grow into the tween and teenage years of middle school and beyond, I've unfortunately noticed a sharp change. These years are challenging in and of themselves for so many reasons. On top of that, we now live in a post-pandemic time. Needs have changed for our children. Mental health struggles and diagnoses have risen. Home lives have been turned upside down to navigate the new normals. Recent inflation impacts many in meeting basic needs. Stressors in students have grown with academics and sports as well as within the arts. And don't even get me started on social media. But there is just so much pressure on all of our children, and the availability and affordability of proper mental health resources and support for the population requiring them are no longer sufficient, leading to many going untreated. My own students in the past have sought counseling services throughout the school days, only to quickly be carted back to school after their allotted 10-minute time frame. They've reported bullying episodes anonymously, only to be called down to the counseling office to discuss the matter uncomfortably, in person and in way more depth, and then learn the bully has been told of the reports, thankfully not sharing their names, but leading to the fear that they'll know that the situation was them and it will be made worse. They don't always connect on a comfort level with their assigned counselor, which makes things even more awkward. And for these reasons, my students and many of their friends have turned a blind eye on most counselors and services provided by the district. A single school counselor isn't equipped to handle the academic and emotional support of hundreds of students per grade. And current school messaging isn't getting through to students because it's not designed from a place of acceptance within the teenage mind. I support evaluating the current structure and introducing necessary additional staff to separate out academic and emotional needs for our students. I strongly support the district undergoing the external review of the counseling services and resources provided to each student across all grade levels. In addition, I support creating and maintaining a community action committee to follow through with recommendations, changes, and monitoring for the long term. We can't just post signs outside on school grounds and posters on our walls anymore with positive messaging. It's not getting through to our students and giving them the support they deserve. We need to revamp outdated practices and communication styles and use strategies for the current times.
Thank
Our
you.
children deserve and need more. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, come right up.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Lothian. I have 3 kids in the district, but we are a homeschooling family. I'm here tonight to support Jennifer Black and her, the support of children's mental health in the district. When I have kids that have needed special help academically, and they were followed by people who are experts in supporting reading or experts in supporting math. Whenever they had needed IEPs for help with autism support or other issues, we had people who were experts at helping them, and there was frequent communication between the team at school and at home with our family. And I know that everyone here deeply cares about supporting kids and the whole child. And I support Jen's, the external review and the community action committee proposed tonight by her, to hope that we can foster a partnership between the school and parents to help support children and their mental health in the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sure.
Good evening. My name is Eva George, and I have a student at the high school. We live in Ferguson Township. I'm a certified Pennsylvania music educator, K through 12, and I teach, have for the last 6 years taught K through 8 music. Yes, middle schoolers. These are our highest risk students, I believe, and they deserve our respect, our kindness, and in addition, people who will treat them as humans. I would like to relay 3 short vignettes indicating that this is not always the case in support of this external review. My daughter had to check her heart rate at a certain point. She was having anxiety issues related to a medical condition. She checked her watch when a counselor was in the classroom speaking about girls' period products being in question of being taken to the restroom at the middle school. And the counselor was supporting the teacher in their argumentativeness with students regarding taking these things to the restroom. Her heart rate was climbing. She checked her watch. The counselor said, "Put that watch away." She said, "But I'm just checking. I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I just need to check my heart rate," because of a medical condition. And the counselor in front of the entire class said, "You don't have a medical condition in your records." Now, I'm sorry, but that is absolutely unacceptable. I brought it to the attention of the principal at that time and was not allowed a meeting with the counselor. They were busy, so I spoke with the principal instead. This is one vignette of said counselor. Second vignette, same counselor. A child wants to go in the building because they are in need of period products. Once again, this seems to be a flowing topic, of course, in middle school. This counselor denied their entrance. The child was clearly in tears, very upset. Denied again. Told the counselor she would absolutely go, allow her to come with her, come to my locker, see what I'm getting. Denied again. The child sat and cried. My daughter witnessed this. Vignette 3. Her friend exits the counseling office terribly upset because they had just disclosed for the very first time that they were thinking about suicide. And rather than addressing that student in a human fashion on a one-to-one basis as a person, They said, "One moment, please," and turned around and called that child's parent. While I support, of course, a parent being notified, I believe the student's dignity was denied in that moment. And these are the accountability moments that must be addressed, and I fully support an external review of these processes and of the people that we are entrusting our students to. This is unacceptable behavior from someone who should be not lording power over our students, but empowering our students to look at their mental health as important and valid.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Scott Cole from Ferguson Township. I have a senior at State High as well as a recent State High graduate. I'm here also on behalf of, to support Jen Black in her quest for an external review of mental health policies and procedures, and I have a few big ticket items that I'd like to be considered. How can we better detect students when they're having mental health issues, especially early on? I know there's surveys that the kids are asked to fill out. I can tell you my daughter has personally told me she lies on those because she doesn't want to get red flagged. Do we have a see something, say something policy for teachers and administrators in addition to our students? When a teacher or another student reports a concern, what kind of investigation is done at that point? What are the students' other teachers asked what they're seeing? Are the parents asked what they're seeing, close friends? If the person's already receiving mental health care, someone should be in touch with their professional. How can the district enhance or improve its current mental health offerings? Are there curriculum changes that can be made in the health classes to place more emphasis on mental health, lessen the stigma of asking for help, and show our students that they're valued and worthy? Can we do more with less? I know that there are not enough people to go around for the need. Can there be group sessions on specific topics? I know my son benefited greatly from this when Brandon Copenhaver passed, and the boys that he had sent a goodbye email to were met with on a regular basis for 2 months. It really did help. And open up the sports center for anybody who's struggling. My daughter spent 4.5 months this year inpatient at various mental health facilities, and when she came back after one of those stays, she did not qualify for support because she already had a therapist in school. I can't imagine why you would not want to make sure that people in that particular situation were feeling like if they felt overwhelmed, they could talk to somebody right away and not have to wait. I also want to make sure that best practices are brought to bear on topics like bullying, either in person or cyber. Students who are struggling to make it to school or do the work that's required of them, or students like my daughter who spent time inpatient and then have to return to school, which can be extraordinarily jarring. It's chaotic, there's way more people, there's not the structure that there was in a hospital setting. How do we make sure that those students have a smooth transition back? And finally, how can we individualize success? This district is amazing in the opportunities that it provides, both academically and with extracurriculars, but it's absolutely ultra competitive. And so there is definitely times when I have seen kids, including my own, where they are comparing themselves to an ideal that they just can't reach. And it leaves them feeling as though they're not successful when in reality they are. How can we show our kids that success looks different for everybody? And that just because you're not the best doesn't mean you're the worst. Success looks different for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Lauren Lowe. I'm a resident of Patton Township. I have 3 district students. My oldest is a graduate, and I currently have a State High junior and a State High freshman. I am also here to urge support for an external review, an expert review in relation to the district's policies and procedures related to suicide prevention and postvention and response. I wanted to share some of my personal experience with my own family following the death by suicide this spring. sorry. My youngest daughter, my 9th grader, has had the privilege of having Abby as her closest friend, one of her closest friends through most of her life. So following her death in the spring, it was difficult to address. Personally, I have a background in education and mental health, yet as a parent, I still did not know what to do. It was difficult for me to know what to do to help my own child to return to school and to move forward. School plays a vital role in bridging that gap. I believe that there are some areas that are of definite concern that we can improve on as a district. The first of which is sharing of information and proactive outreach to families. Within our district, we have had 3 deaths by suicide within the last 4 years. In looking at those deaths, there is definite evidence of relation between some of those deaths, between previous deaths and previous suicide attempts. I think this is a definite area of concern that we can better address through proactive practices. Following the death in the spring, I did receive outreach from school. However, it was delayed. Immediately following, district personnel, teachers, administrators did respond and help when I asked for help. But what happens to the students whose parents don't ask or don't know to ask? We received some outreach in connection with community resources weeks later. It would have been very helpful to have that outreach sooner, and to have outreach when there is a concern, a serious mental health concern within a peer group prior to a more severe consequence. I feel there are definite ways to do this that can maintain student confidentiality. The other issue is the school climate and reports of bullying. In discussing these issues with my daughter and reviewing social media following the incident in the spring, it became clear that there was a perception among many students that reporting incidents would not yield a result. Whether or not this perception is accurate, it's a problematic on its own. Even if it's a false perception, if students feel that there's nothing going to happen, then they aren't going to report things and they aren't going to seek help. So it is my opinion that the best way to address these issues and to help students and save lives moving forward is to seek an expert external review, a comprehensive review, to look at our suicide prevention and postvention activities.
Thank you.
This statement comes from a parent who wishes to remain anonymous. Her daughter's name will be changed to Jane to protect her anonymity. When Jane was in 5th grade, a student had inappropriately touched her and a number of other children. Attached to that email that was sent to the parents of the children who were involved was a letter signed by all of the children. In essence, the letter said that they all understood that what went on was not appropriate, would not be done again, and would not be brought up, spoken of again. My 12-year-old daughter was in a room without myself or my husband when this took place. When Jane was in 7th grade, I received an email from her counselor on a Friday at 3:27 p.m. She indicated that she spoke to Jane that day because a student assistance report form was sent on Jane by one of her friends. She and the friend were sharing stories from previous years. Jane shared something that the girl became alarmed about. The counselor provided no other information other than that Jane will share with me when she gets home. I called the counselor and left her a voicemail. I emailed her back asking her to provide more information, that I'm not sure if Jane will feel upset, embarrassed, so I would appreciate more details. I didn't hear back from her. Jane told me it had to do with an incident that happened in 6th grade, an incident that I had not been made aware of by the school. A boy held a sharp tool to my daughter's neck. He also held a sharp tool to another child's back. Prior to these incidents, the boy slammed a child's head into the window of a school bus, requiring the child to have surgery. When I spoke with the counselor on Monday, I asked her why was I not notified of the 6th grade incident. She said that Jane told the teacher and they moved seats so they wouldn't have to sit next to each other. This boy has a history of violence. He should have been removed from the school when he slammed the other child's head into the bus window. If the school would have removed him when they should have, he wouldn't have harmed my daughter or the other girl. The weekend before Jane's freshman year of high school, she came to me and said she was having thoughts of killing herself because she didn't want to go back to school. Jane spent 10 days at an inpatient facility. During a therapy session after her inpatient treatment, she and her therapist told me that the same boy from 6th grade had also inappropriately touched her multiple times at school. Her therapist and I contacted the Child Helpline, who advised they can't help because it was a minor touching another minor, to call the police. We called the police. They said to contact the school resource officer. The school resource officer told us they couldn't do anything because this occurred in middle school and she was in high school. Jane has had to have her schedule reviewed and changed to assure that she is not in any classes of the boy that harmed her. We as parents have a right to know what is going on at school. Incidents should not be hidden from us. Our children should not be coerced to sign letters that silence them. Are the schools measured on number of incidents reported, suspensions, expulsions? Is there a reason the no tolerance policy seems to be lost in the wind? Why aren't students who are causing harm being held accountable for their actions? I support Jen Black's call for an external review.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Karen McKinney Marvasti. I'm in Patton Township, and my daughter was a student at Park Forest Elementary School and Middle School, and now she's a senior at State High. Had two quick comments I wanted to make on my own, and then I have an anonymous comment to read from another parent. Just listening to what others have said, I've had a lot of thoughts ever since May, obviously, but two big thoughts that keep coming back to me is what other people have mentioned, that communication between the counseling office or the school whenever our kids get called into a counselor's office or have a disciplinary issue. I'm surprised that we don't get an email. My daughter, when she was at Park Forest Middle School, on 3 different occasions got called into the counselor's office. It turned out just like arguments amongst her friends and things, but there was one time, like someone else was talking about, where her friends were concerned about her health. And it turned out their concern was misplaced. There wasn't reason for concern, but I didn't find this out until last year, and she was a junior in high school. So I'm wondering if, my daughter's friends were concerned about her health, why didn't the counselor get in touch with me and say, her friends brought her in because they were concerned about her. I've heard of disciplinary incidents where parents aren't told their child was, called in for something disciplinary. And then, like someone else mentioned, the idea that if there's a problem going on in a cohort or a grade, that without disclosing private information about names of students, it could still be an email sent out to all parents in that grade just saying something's up, ask your kid if they're okay. But I'll read the anonymous comment now. I support as well the external review proposed by the board. This is what this parent says. I do believe that student success is at the heart of everything State College Area School District does. This review, along with the advisory council, will help ensure the district is up to date on best mental health practices and procedures. I feel students would benefit from better communication practices between counseling, teachers, and home. It's important to keep home in the loop when a situation arises at school and allow families to do what they can while also adhering to privacy laws. I also believe the school needs more transparency in the processes used to follow up on bullying claims. The anonymity of Safe to Say program makes this difficult, but if students, staff, and families had more knowledge of the process, it would help them feel more confident something is being done, and more importantly, help them understand when the time is right to report any unchanged behaviors. The main point I would like to speak to tonight, though, is I hope that through external review and advisory council, we can move to a more proactive, less reactive set of policies when it comes to mental health support. Yes, of course, you're limited in what you know. Obviously, staff can only support the problems and situations you're aware of. For students who are struggling off the radar, the district does have many amazing resources available. These resources need to be shared over and over and over again with all district students, staff, and families. The more regular reminders, the more likely those in need will know where and how to access resources. For the students who the schools know are struggling or even suspect may be struggling, a more proactive approach to counseling and especially follow-up is needed. Once a referral is given through staff or home or peers, one meeting just isn't enough when it comes to mental health or bullying cases. From experiences with my own children, even after reaching out to counseling as a parent with concerns, there's been no follow-up. Quick check-ins after the situation seems resolved are important to make sure no further feelings or problems have come to light. I was so disappointed in the district response in the days and weeks following Abby Smith's funeral. I know in the immediate days after Abby died, there were many resources available in the buildings. It was wonderful to have in place and a great opportunity for students who were both comfortable and self-aware enough to seek them out. When students returned to school after funeral services, however, it would have been amazing for counseling to check in with those students and make sure they were okay. Let's improve the systems in place so counseling can have the support they need to provide the most effective, proactive, and up-to-date care possible for our students. A full external review and formation of an advisory council will help improve the mental health practices our children deserve.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Dee Stout, and I live in Patton Township. Coincidentally, I sent you all an email about 5 tonight, so I'm sure you didn't read it yet. And I'm not reading that. I was just asked, as I came this evening in support of Jen, to read an anonymous letter, but it's going to be short. It says, "Good evening. I want to thank you for listening to this message, as we could not be there this evening. It directly affects our family, specifically about our middle school child. While I do love the counselor at the Mount Nittany Middle School, the concern is that not much is done, and occasionally the victim gets blamed. When my child was being bullied, the bullying was done by 2 classmates, so if one wasn't there, the other was bullying. It felt very much like an attack all day, including on the bus. My child, along with their group of friends, also getting bullied by these individuals, expressed their concerns to trusted teachers and paras, and were rebuffed or told to plain ignore the bullies. This is hard when the bullies follow you and when you are going to trusted adults and not being helped. We were at the point where my child was crying every night, having nightmares, and afraid of doing anything except to read in bed. This was very much not like our child. We work every day to ensure all of our kids are able to come to us with any concerns, and we'll continue to do so. Our middle schooler still has their moments, but is much better off this year. We had to work outside of the school district for our middle schooler to get the help needed and to feel listened to. Having transparent policies in place and being kept informed about status and completion of any investigation into bullying would make my heart happy. Having extended review would be very important, and the advisory council could act on the external review recommendations, but then continue to monitor everything. I've made this anonymous, as I am still very concerned that the bullies will find out we are voicing these concerns. And the fact that I have to do that is why we need these changes and moving forward with these safety measures in place. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else? We're going to have to probably put ourselves a limit on public comment to some extent to get to our agenda. Do we have anyone else tonight? Anyone? One online? Okay. Kathy, if you want to unmute yourself, I think you should be able to speak.
Thank you. My name is Kathy Lenardi, and I'm actually a former chair of the PTO Council there in State College, former resident of Half Moon Township, as well as Ferguson Township. I actually sat on the committee probably 10, 15 years ago that rewrote at the time the mission and vision statement for the district. Both my daughters attended Grays Woods and Park Forest Middle School. My older daughter actually spent time inpatient when she was at Park Forest, and it saddens me to see that there appears to be little to no change in how the school district handles students with mental health crises. I would ask the board, as someone who worked very hard for many years in State College, that if you feel that you are doing everything right and everything possible to support the mental health of your students, why would you not be okay with an external review? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to start out our meeting of the whole with Culture, Climate, and Learning Committee. Starting off, we're going to have several updates, including an update on Acadian's benchmarks and measures of academic progress. Members of the administrative team are going to share this report.
Good evening. We'd like to share our annual update for MAP and Acadians, the way we do each year. Before we do that, though, I want to preface that the beginning of our report is going to contain some information that's come to us from a study that NWEA MAP conducted. It's a very large study and a very impactful study, and it's just one piece of data that we're using as ESSER funds sunset in the United States. We're looking at what schools need to be able to continue with the path of recovery. So they looked at both the achievement gap as well as how fast or how well students are growing academically. And when we were first coming out of the pandemic in 21-22, the scores were really positive. But I think there were a lot of things at play there. Many schools were still remote. Sometimes students would take it virtually at home, or they didn't take it, only certain groups of students took it who were in school. So I'm not sure that 21-22 gave us a full picture. But we've seen since 21-22, the scores nationally slip. Our scores in State College don't mirror the slippage of the national scores, but I'd like to share some of that with you. There have been numerous studies, and there's still a lot more to look at. The NAEP results will be released in January, and that's something we want to pay attention to as well. What are those scores telling us in terms of recovery? We look at our own state scores, for example, to see how we're doing there. And it's just more and more needs to be looked at, not just one data point. So, but tonight we're just talking about MAP when it comes to this study. Next slide. So they used 7.7 million students in over 22,000 public schools. So this is a very large study. And they were looking at, in this graph, on growth, academic growth, in 23-24, which fell short of pre-pandemic trends in most grades except third grade. So in third grade, they bucked the trend just a little and made above average growth, which is great. We'll take that win. Those would be students who were not in public schools during the pandemic. They would have not yet entered our school system. They would have been younger. And so we're looking at the national trends of growth lagging behind pre-pandemic trends. And they believe there's a lot of issues that contribute to that. We kind of know what some of them are. Nationally, chronic absenteeism, as well as pretty large-scale staffing shortages across the country, which contribute to the issue. Next slide. This is the same slide, but really highlighting grades 6, 7, and 8. And if you look in reading, the growth is concerning. Overall, about 20% below pre-pandemic trends. And they're looking into why. They speculate about why. Reading is a little bit more difficult sometimes to remediate at upper grades. because of the cumulative effects and the different gaps that exist. The materials are often written for younger students and are not so engaging. Also, with math, you can remediate specific skills, where in reading it's a little more difficult to diagnose them. Not impossible, it's just more challenging for schools in that grade. Also, in middle school, you know that cell phone usage and social media usage and sports and clubs, there's lots of things that come into play that students, their time is taken on lots of things. But we see that growth is not as strong as pre-pandemic. And this is, again, a national trend. So let's look at the next slide, at achievement nationally. And we can see the achievement, this speaks to the achievement gaps nationally in the spring of 2024. And you can see that there are significant achievement gaps that remain, and it would take about 4 months of additional math instruction to close the achievement for 5th graders. But the next slide is the same slide, but layers on top the number of months estimated to close the achievement gap. And if you look at that, it's really pretty startling to see by 8th grade, they would need basically another year of school to close the achievement gap at current rates. The degree of achievement does vary a bit between grade levels, as you can see. Older students tend to grow less than younger students. That's just always been the case with MAP. It's harder to show growth the older you are on that specific exam. They do switch to a different version of the assessment in 6th grade. They start taking the 6+ test. And that's where it becomes more challenging for them to grow. And that's something that we've spoken to the board about before. We know that in working with the company. It's one of our growth areas. But this graph just particularly shocked me, and I thought it would be something to share with you as well.
The next several slides, we're going to take a look at national trends for reading and math for students of color. You can see that the impact on students of color is notable, that Black and Hispanic students have been hardest hit nationally, and that as they are continuing to look at achievement and growth for these groups, that there's no evidence that these groups are able to catch up. The next slide is, there's a lot to look at here. So your lighter colors are your pre-COVID scores, and the darker pink and darker blue are post-COVID or 22-23 scores. And what we see here is that, as Chris mentioned, the gains in 23-24 still lag behind pre-COVID levels. And this is a graph that demonstrates how some of those groups have been hit the hardest. You might also note, though, that for students of color, for Black students in particular, when you look at this slide, they're actually in opposition to the trend in reading, and their growth is greater than some of the other groups. And again, as Chris mentioned, with regard to math, you can see that scores in reading versus math do look different when you're starting to look at those groups. Also important to note, and this will be evident as we look at some of our own data in a few minutes, that middle school reading is probably the most significant area of concern moving forward. And again, this is another graph indicating some of the same ideas. Black students are further ahead in reading than other students of color, but the distance to recovery in math is greater for some of those students. And then as we look at some surprising results, as Chris shared as well, even students who are not in the school system during the pandemic are experiencing growth and achievement below those pre-pandemic levels. So as we look at this slide, we know that their growth is continuing to lag. We know that recovery is something that could potentially take months. And also that the greatest area of concern is connected to our middle school students. And we do see some of these things already reflected as we look at our own comprehensive plan in terms of supporting that growth. NWEA is going to release new norms in the 2025 school year to reflect the trends that they've been able to investigate nationally. It's obvious as we look at this and as we investigate our own data that those norms have changed over the past 3 years. And one of the things that NWEA is promoting as they sort of look at and disaggregate some of this data is that these gaps in achievement are not necessarily normal or expected, that we should continue to provide high expectations and high support for students. We need to continue to address their learning gaps. We need to continue to work with them to identify their misunderstandings and help to continue their growth.
Now I'd like to turn our attention to our district data. Yeah.
That slide about the students that were not in the school system, are you talking about homeschool students?
No, I'm talking about they would have been very young. They wouldn't have been in kindergarten yet.
Okay, so it's after that. Okay, thank you.
And they haven't really defined like why that would be necessarily, like when you think about like limitations to preschool access and other things during the pandemic, there are a lot of things that might contribute to that.
Okay, thank you.
So our district data for 23-24, and now we'll turn to our traditional report. And the first two slides are just reminders about what MAP data is used for in our district. It's something that we look at to help teachers to identify the best instructional model. It is administered 3 times a year in the fall, winter, and spring. I think that we also want to look at that spring administration, because we had a very large window this past year, and one of the things we saw is that some schools or teachers waited till the very end of the year to give it after all of the PSSAs have happened. So it's really a tough timing because all of those things fall at the end of the year. And so are kids really tired of taking tests? Sure, they absolutely are. So are we getting our best result? That's why I'm glad we have 3 administrations. We can also look at the winter and see, we tend to see a pretty big uptick in the winter, and then it looks like they kind of like go down in the spring, but I'm not sure if that's a true reading. That's why we look at other data sources as well, not just this one. It's just one data source that we look at for that. But it is a nationally normed test, which gives us some really good data on how we're doing nationally. It is an interim benchmark assessment, and the 50th percentile or higher is considered growth and achievement is considered above average. Overall, our data is commendable when we compare ourselves with the national trends. And the higher the achievement scores, the harder it is to grow over time. We know that. It's kind of like one of the banes of our existence. The higher we are, the harder it is to keep moving them on this particular assessment, because it is limited. Yeah. All right, our next one.
All right, I'm going to talk about some of our data here. So looking at achievement and growth. Achievement, as far as, if you can hear me okay, is moderately above average, while growth is average, like Kristen mentioned there. So our district median average, 74th percentile. Reading summary would be below the median. Math, we're above the median. As far as growth, we're in the 47th percentile. Reading is below median, and math is above median. How is the district doing growth by quartile? So our top quartile growth is 46th. About the same as the norm. And as far as our middle 2 quartiles, growth is the 48th, approximately equal to the norm. And our lowest quartile, 51st, approximately equal to the norm. So breaking that out there by reading and math. So how are our district students doing achievement status by quartile? So our top quartile is 54. It's a larger proportion than the typical, which is at 25%. Our middle 2 quartiles, 38%, is a smaller portion than the typical 50%. Lowest quartile is 8%, a smaller proportion than typical, which the typical is at 25. And math growth over time. Our students growing over time. So the three-year growth is an average relative to national norms. Reading is consistently average. However, mathematics is average, but varies across the years there. So looking at the bar graph or the chart, you can see that variation there between reading and math, and then the averages across the bottom as well as to the chart to the right.
So when we look at our own data with regard to math, you can see that our trends are not as significant as national trends. However, we do sort of meet some of those national trends. So students in those early grades who, again, were enrolled in school yet are still lagging behind. If you look at second grade, for example, from 2018 to 19 to 23, 24, the net change is -5. And we continue to see that with regard to math, but again, not as significant as reading, which is on the next slide. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure to point out in reading is that, again, although we are not as significant as national trends, we do start to see some significant changes at the middle level, which is where nationally we're also seeing those changes emerge. So those are some things that as we continue to look at our data and move forward, we'll need to take into account.
Thank you, Jackie. So I'm going to talk a little bit by ethnic groups, breakdown of achievement. So ranges from the 43rd percentile for African American students to the 86th for Asian students. That's on achievement, and its growth were the 32nd percentile for African American students to the 51st percentile for Asian students. I believe we mentioned this last year. We're working with our transition from Synergy, the data that's always a year behind, as we transition to Power School to actually get a little bit more in depth, more granular with our ethnic breakdown. We did have some challenges with our multiracial groups were being reported with the subgroup was being reported with Caucasian percentage. And we feel that as we move to Power School, we'll be able to get that more specific information, data points as we make that transition. But see our groups there don't exactly represent our demographics that we know in our Future Ready index. And breaking down ethnicity and gender. So if you look at the columns, you'll have the different ethnicities across the top, and then below those is a sub-breakdown by gender, female, male. So across the top, Asian, Caucasian, other, Hispanic, and African American. And then if you left on the right side, it'll break down math, reading, and then again, math and reading. As you look at achievement and growth, there's a lot packed into that chart, but it's a good visual to look at.
So always in the past, we have only presented on MAP. We used, if you recall, if you've been with us for a while, we used to use another benchmarking in kindergarten through second called AIMSweb, and we did switch to using the Acadians benchmarking data system for both, mainly for reading. I'll be talking about some early collection of math and then our goals for this year. But really, to give you a report of our younger students and the focus on foundational skills, we thought it was important to begin to share that data. So this is really the first year the board will see some of the evidence for that or where we stand, and we'll talk a little bit about it. Just to give you a background on what the Acadians benchmarking system does, it's really designed to assess the foundational skills, again, early skills in reading and math. It provides data to us to give us overall how healthy our tier or our classrooms are in Tier 1, and then it identifies any students who needs additional interventions and gives us a way to track their progress over time. So there's a progress monitoring system built into the system, unlike MAP. It really does focus on early literacy, early numeracy skills, phonemic awareness, the alphabet principle, fluency, and areas like that that are critical for the success once they reach the comprehension stages that the MAP assesses on. It again really helps our MTSS teams because it provides the drill down data. So a lot of times, even if MAP is used to identify students that need interventions, we then drill down further using the Acadian system that can say really what are the students lacking. So students in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade who score a certain RIT on the MAP, we will use this assessment also, again, just to get drilled down data to really where do we focus if they're going to receive an intervention. And again, with progress monitoring, students that receive intervention or who fall below the targeted benchmark are progress monitored using this system. If they're a Tier 2 student, it just means they're below. They receive a benchmarking progress monitoring every other week. And if they are a Tier 3 student, so pretty intensive services, they are progress monitored using this system every week so that we can track trends, we can track growth rates, and make sure that the intervention that we are using is being effective. And if not, in 6 to 8 weeks, in looking at this data, we can change that intervention. So again, for about the past 3 years, we have used the Acadians as a universal screener for our kindergarten through 3rd graders, and we do use it in 4th and 5th grade to gather additional information based on the MAP score. Beginning this year, we are going to be using it for K to 5 because it reviews both computation and application and analysis to give us a combined composite. And as you'll be hearing in the future, we are getting ready to go through a math review and working through that process. This will be additional data we can collect to really target and look at what skills our students are missing in the elementary schools to better prepare them for math in the middle and high schools. So I'll talk about some trends again today or this evening. I'm only going to report on reading. We do have some math, but it has been inconsistent. We were really focused on reading as we started our MTSS and our response to intervention to qualify instead of the discrepancy model in special education. But really, what we notice about State College students is about 85% of our students enter our schools at or above the proficiency level. We are beyond blessed with that. That is atypical of school districts. So we, as we know, are high performing. Our goal at the end of kindergarten is 100% of students are at or above the benchmark. What we see, and I went ahead and put both 2023 and then 2022 is below that to see it's pretty consistent in kindergarten. But we normally start with about 85% at or above. We end, we lose some of our students who are above to just at proficient. But for the most part, we continue to trend, and we're actually growing to about a 90% overall proficiency in kindergarten. Again, with the goal of 100% with those very, very basic foundational skills. Where oh, yes,
Kenya.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I just thought, so I'm a data person, you
Yep.
know that. For the benefit, we have a lot of people here today who may have never seen anything like this before, including some of us. And from your presentation, I think I've got it. But could you just really quickly, the blue.
I am so sorry. So
represents
yeah, absolutely.
above.
And Jackie picked out that I didn't have beginning of the year. We also assess 3 times a year. So anything in the blue is the students are above the benchmark target, so above where the national norms say that a student should be. Green is right where they're on target, so they're meeting what they consider is a proficiency rate when they enter kindergarten. And then yellow is about 6 months to possibly about 6 months behind, and then the red is they're significantly below the benchmark. So when you see we start, and I don't have, so we started with 76% above last year in kindergarten. At the end of the year, 52% remained above. However, when you calculate the green and the blue, we've really kept the overall proficiency level. We want to look at we want to grow all students at their potential, so we would like to see a similar, if not a stronger, end of the year. Keep in mind, last year was a brand new resource, so really we have consistent data in kindergarten to actually show that we are reaching about 90% in kindergarten.
All right, and just to drive this home, like the benchmark is changing throughout the years, right? So we're seeing them
Yes.
enter and
Yep,
we're
I'm going to
expecting-
talk about that on the next slide.
Okay,
Yes,
I just
100%. So
wanna-
at the beginning of the year, they might have to name 5 letters of the alphabet that they look at on a random sampling and maybe produce. I had that paper, and I can give anybody that of what they need to do. And then by the end of the year, they have to do more of breaking down words into different syllables, phonemic awareness. So they do all these subtests to provide a composite score. Yes. So getting into what some of the board is asking with first grade, we have done a lot of review over the past year with our comprehensive supports of MTSS. And actually, Jonathan will be talking a little bit about that in the next presentation on summer school. But really, if our kindergarten students and at the beginning of the year, first grade, do not really master letter sound correspondence, that they understand the letters and the sounds and how to begin to blend those words, we begin to lose because at the beginning of first year, it is still a very basic foundational. Can you look at one consonant, vowel, consonant word and blend it? By the middle of the year, they are asking them to blend 15 or more words, and they also now have to read an oral reading fluency passage. So they have to look at a passage, they have to read and get so many words correct. When we look at our first grade data, we realize from the beginning of the year, you'll notice there, so 71% came in last year at the beginning of the year above, so they made ground, 14% proficient, so there's that 85, but we've lost about 10%, and we've also added more to our below and our far below, and that is mainly because of that oral reading fluency and the nonsense words, so really understanding letter sound correspondence. So we want to be looking at that. That's something that Jackie and Chris and the curriculum coordinators with Title I, what can we be doing? Do we need to shift anything or start anything earlier? Where's our focus need to be in first grade? Because if I jump one to second and third, what we do in second and third grade is we really maintain the students from first grade. So we have consistent data to say that we are showing and staying at that 86th percentile, about 86% at or above from the beginning to the end of the year in both second grade, and again, those students in third grade. I worked last week to pull some data just to look at cohorts. I thought it would be interesting to see where the students that were in second grade last year began in kindergarten. And this is really where we began to see, if you can look at these. And again, we've only done the Acadians for 3 years. At the end of that kindergarten, the students who just finished second grade, so they're currently third graders, they ended the year with about 13% of the children being below or well below. By the end of first grade, we were at that 25, but notice that we then picked some kids back up. Notice that we don't have the kindergarten data from the year, but they're at 22%, so that's a little bit of that jump. And then down here in kindergarten, though, you see the similar pattern as you did from 23 to 24, whereas we ended the year in kindergarten with about 13%, but by the end of first grade, 25. So we really want to continue to review that with our folks and look at the resource. Again, last year was the first year for our Into Reading resource. We have added an additional 30. We added time this year in our ELA block. Keep in mind, we're embedding the writing. We're trying to do more writing across the curriculum. And we actually have 30 minutes embedded into every kindergarten through fifth grade schedule where students can get what they need. The intervention students are pulled during that time, but it also allows for extensions and enhancements for kids that are ready for it, but then focused instruction where they're not being pulled out of any subject area or missing anything else during that time. So we're excited for that piece too, and I really am thankful for the curriculum office for working through that and making that happen this year.
So Danielle, you mentioned the change in resource. So like if we put a big black line between the years where it changed, it would be between 22, 23 and 23, 24 with Fidelity, right?
Yes.
We had some schools had some ECRI and some other things.
Well, and with the Into Reading resource, so the whole other little crazy thing is not every school had ECRI. Last year in 23, 24 was the first year that all 8 buildings received foundational fluency that had the research of the enhanced core, so they put more into it with the into reading resource.
Okay. So, yeah. So when we look at these in the future, like, I think delineate.
With the
like,
line and
yeah,
shape,
it would just be
sure.
really helpful to remind us all that was a big shift in what our curriculum was. At least visually, it would help me a lot.
Yeah, sure.
Next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Can you go back to the cohort?
I apologize. We have one more slide and
Go
then
for it.
and then questions.
So our continued call to action is to continually to look at every single administration of every single data point that we get, and looking at how do our resources and our instruction match up with what we're seeing. Are we seeing gains? Are we seeing losses? And investigate all of that. We have a commitment to sustained and equitable recovery for all students. And looking at our subgroups, looking at our top groups, looking at every group in between. We want to continue also to build on our work with MTSS through Patent's partnership on foundational literacy and others that we can have with them. Continue to maintain a focus on, as I said, all data. Continue to make decisions for our students that help them to be on grade level as close as possible when they leave us, because we know that that's a really important thing for their future success. And to focus our resources, time, money, and people on the comprehensive plan, which addresses learning gaps. And to utilize MAP data in the curriculum review process coming up for math and for science. And also, I would say to continue to advocate for school funding. I would tack that. That's a Chris Merritt. I'm tacking it on. Because, as I said, ESSER funds are sunsetting, and schools across the nation are relying on that money to maintain the personnel that they have. And I think it's just really critical that we keep funding at the rate that is needed until we can demonstrate a better recovery.
Agreed. Okay. Go ahead, Jackie. Did you? Oh, yeah. No. Anne had a question.
Going to that cohort overview, can you explain going from, I understand with cohort 1, the year shifting at the well below from 5 to 14, that makes sense to me. But with cohort 4, so can you explain that kind of jump? Jackie's just helping me, talking about like passing me notes to make sense of that, but I wanted to kind of have you all explain that as well.
Sure, I can try. So in the students who finished first grade last year, they are currently second graders, so they are right now in our second grade. At the end of their kindergarten year, they were at about 87% at or above, which is kind of consistent with previous years, and about 13% below. There's the end of the year first grade data last year that even with the new resource, and again, we asked them to really follow that resource unit by unit, and we're going to be looking at some things. That's where we're seeing that we're losing about 10% of our kids. And it is that if they don't have those skills mastered, we've got to get them to be able to begin to blend constant, know their sound, know sound correspondence, be able to manipulate letters and sounds and words. They get into the graphemes, the phonemes. I mean, we can talk about all that. And then also be looking at a text by January, and then even bigger in May to read. So what can we be doing in kindergarten to enhance the foundational skills so that they are better mastered and mapped in the brain with all of the science behind it? And then in first grade, do we need to do anything to enhance September, October, November, that we're hitting some of these skills or looking at that to impact during those intervention times?
Debbie.
I just want to ask a data question relating to that. In this cohort, is it a true cohort that are you comparing the same kids over time, or it's whoever showed up?
It would have been the cohort. So you've got to look at it, those kindergarten kids of the however many that is, if you even look at the numbers.
Right. So it's
They
not
have
exactly
to
the
be
same
there
kid.
the whole year to get the end of the year data. So if Jackie moved here in January, she wouldn't be in the May data. But if a student moved in at the beginning of first year and took the beginning of the year benchmark, the middle of the year, and the end of the year, they would count in the first grade data, but would not have been one of those ones in the kindergarten. So when
In particular, right, I don't know what our numbers are, but there may be a significant chunk of kids who enter the district at first grade and not at kindergarten. So what you may be gathering there is a little bit of what's going on in our schools, but also a little bit of what's going on in other schools.
Sure.
As kids enter the district in first grade.
100%, and I'm hoping,
It's important to keep
we
that in
keep
mind.
talking about Power School with the MTSS module that we will be getting, I am hoping by next year that we would be able to look at exact cohorts that started kindergarten. It's just, we don't even, with Acadience right now, unless we hand manually enter everything, we can't even disaggregate the data down to look at intersectionality and marginalized populations. By next year, we hope to be able to do that.
Thanks. I had a question. Oh, go ahead, Aaron, you go first.
So I had a couple questions, and I wonder if I sort of have questions that pertain to both levels. I'm really focused on the upper elementary and the middle levels. A lot of great data, a lot of, collection of things, a lot of slides. I'm wondering if you could just take a minute, based on everything that you've read, how you've interpreted the data, can you just give me, like, for both the middle level and for maybe the upper elementary level, what are your two biggest takeaways? Like, what do you feel like the data are telling you that we need to be working on specifically?
Want me to answer that? Yeah. Okay. So I think when I look at just our data in our district, I might feel a certain way about looking at the middle school scores not being like the dip. And then when I understood this larger study of 7.7 million students in America, I understood a little more the context for that dip and understood a little more about why. As far as what we're doing about it, that's a really good question. We're building our MTSS systems. We're looking at more targeted and more specific intervention for kids when they need it. We are also making sure we have training set up, make sure teachers feel confident and that they have all of the tools to be able to implement the ECRI overlay and understand it. There was some training, but I'm not sure before I started, like, if we caught all the people. So we're doing that. We're doing a sweep of all the people. And we're gearing up for that. So, and also sharing the data. So that's one of the things I think we always have to do is share it with the people who lead the departments. And so today, Jackie and I had a meeting with the coordinators, K-12, and shared this data with them. We asked them to think about it, take it back to their departments, and think about it. Because even a student in health in the middle school might be assigned articles that a student is going to struggle with and turn off. And then less learning happens if they're not engaged. So we have tools, and it gives us a more of an emphasis for why those tools are so important. They're so expensive, and they're so important. And one of them is a simple database that helps a teacher identify an article or source, and then allows them to disaggregate like groups and pick the reading level for each of the groups. It's the same article that students don't even realize that they're getting slightly different versions of it. So things like that help us do a better job, that's what we're focusing on and making sure that we have the right things for the right student.
Okay. So as kind of a follow-up to that, it seems like the primary solution that we have to work with when students don't quite meet that benchmark is to say that they need more of something. They need more math, they need more reading, they need but I would like to point out that the name of this committee is Culture, Climate, and Learning. Culture and climate are part of learning, and based on a lot of the comments that I've heard from parents, from teachers, and from students themselves, I wonder if maybe there's something to be said for the culture within the schools, the climate, the emotional well-being of kids, holding some of them back. I'm not sure that the solution is always they need more of something. It may be that they need a better environment to work in. That's just kind of a general comment that I wanted to make. I think you're absolutely spot on with that, but this is one of those things that for me I'm really passionate about considering the environment holistically rather than just as, you know, one spot for curriculum, and over here is the emotional side of it, here's the counseling. Because in reality, those kids are in all those worlds. They're in all those spaces at the same time.
And I'm not a fan of separating those out either. I don't think you can have the lesson over here about that and then resume your math lessons.
Absolutely.
It's got to be combined. There's got to be, it has to be an integrated approach. And that's one of the things we work with coordinators on, is how do you build that in? How do you build in your classroom in a systemic way where it's not something separate and different? And then we go back to business as usual when we do our lesson. And there are lots of ways to do that, like embedding those skills within what you're teaching. I think you're right.
Okay.
Yeah, good point. I taught at the middle school for longer than I was at.
I remember, I was there.
So, that's
I was
right.
there when it
Oh my
happened.
goodness, that's
Yeah.
right. So
We
not
won't
that
say,
long
we won't
ago.
say what year that was.
But yeah, they're just so it's such a wonderful grade to teach. I taught 7th and 8th grade. Wonderful. I mean, it's also very challenging.
Yes, sir.
And so I understand the need for better and more different tools. But I also think what you said is important. It's not always more of the same,
Mhm.
but more and something different that helps them to get it. So
Yeah,
we're
I
working
mean,
on that
it is-
different
it
too, what
isn't
that
just-
different looks like.
It isn't just here's more math or here's more
Yes.
reading or here's something else to read. It's really, I think, about understanding the kids themselves, what they need. What are we missing? Because it sounds like there are missing pieces that aren't curriculum as well. And I wonder if some of those gaps that we see, some of the concerns that we have, we might see numbers improve if we look at the culture within those schools and we look at the culture within those classrooms and work, you know, on the back end almost.
Yeah.
Okay. So I had a question, although I will say different, but when kids are behind, they definitely need more time to some degree in the interventions that they need. Like, they can't just have the regular classroom gen ed thing switch to their intervention and not also get the gen ed at the same time. It's I know, because that's what Danielle was really getting at, the importance of having this period of time in the classroom day where kids aren't missing the general education and leaving that for their interventions, because historically that was what was happening. And those, having had a child like that, and I know other people at the table have too, those students, you can't substitute the intervention for the gen ed. They need the combination and the integration of those in order to make up that growth. So I'm all on board with what you said, but we also do have to remember that kids that are behind do need more besides, and then everything else too, I agree. The question I had was about NEWA and MAP. If they're going to change the norms, then how the blankety blank do we know what we're doing moving forward?
Oh, they have a plan.
They say they think
They have
that
a plan.
we talked about next year.
Yeah.
What we're going to
So-
have to do?
We actually opted into it this year to go ahead and use their new
Norms or
algorithm. That's a good way of saying it. So we have to do a little bit of comparison and using a chart to be able to report the scores next year. They'll be a little bit different.
I just think that's really frustrating. I just, when we're seeing these rapid changes, we're trying to assess what's going on. We're also in the midst of doing a lot of curricular change to try and address those. And then for them to switch the norms and not being sure if this algorithm or translation process is going to be good fidelity, it's going to make it just really challenging. And the whole thing, it's all very challenging, but I just want to point that out, that we are cognizant of that's happening, and that could have impacts depending on how good a job the math and everything is working out and making that translation to these new norms. It's something to keep an eye on. Anybody else? We've spent a lot of time on this. I think we ideally can hopefully move on. Okay. Thank you so much. This is really important information for us to really be on top of. Up next, we're going to have other administrative team and Jonathan Klingman joining us on an overview of the district's elementary and secondary summer school initiatives. We need a fourth. Get you here. All right.
Hi, everyone. So as you've heard tonight, we are at the conclusion of our COVID relief funding. So with that, we thought it was appropriate to come to you to just give you an update on the past about 7 years of summer school, where things have been financially, how programming has changed, how requirements of all of the grants that we've had to do have affected things, and kind of where we are right now and thinking about the future. I don't want to spend time reading everything. I think you had the chance to do that. So we're going to talk specifically first about our elementary program, talk a little bit too to make sure everyone has a clear understanding of ESY from a special ed lens and how we're trying to overlap in that elementary program with that, and then also a little bit about our secondary program as well. One of the things that we've really tried to focus on for the past several years is to ensure that there is consistent practices in summer school that are related to the related to the regular school year, and that students are getting a continuation and not something different. One of the challenges I think that we've had for several years is that some students may be getting a very different intervention and support that's very different from what was happening in their general education program, and our students who have the most need at this point, their brains are going kind of all over the place. So trying to reorganize that has been a little bit of a challenge, but we're really there in terms of where our summer school program is. We've also, over the years, wanted to ensure that summer school was not just simply reading and or math instruction, but really wanted to also focus in on what types of enriching experiences can help to make the summer a little bit more opportunistic and fun. Specifically too, we've been using lots of different federal funding to kind of cover the costs, but given that we have now exhausted all of our Art Besser funding, this was the first fiscal year where we had to use local funds to provide summer school, and then moving forward, unless there would be some other grant programs that would be available for us. Like I said, I don't want to read all of these pieces, but again, through ARP ESSER, there were very specific expectations that needed to be implemented, including summer enrichment, lost learning. Lots of our costs related to summer school were charged to that. We also had implemented some enrichment programs in order to try to help support some of the elementary grade levels that didn't have access to anything through there, that is also listed in the presentation as well. And we've been pretty proud of what we've been able to grow, and I want to thank the team that's been helping me do that for several years now. We started off at Park Forest when I took over in 2017-18 and really kind of grew. Some of the big things that we want to talk about specifically related to funding changes. We made some adjustments to busing. We were doing door-to-door busing, which is very expensive in the summer, so we moved more to neighborhood busing, and we're able to save substantially costs there. We did have a virtual summer where we still provided some direct intervention for students using a lot of the interventions programs that we were already using during the school year. Given the size, we were able to add clerical support that's really been helping to build programming beginning in January when we start planning until the end of summertime. We did have a year at Coral Street. State College Police were not happy with me. Unfortunately, with a lot of parents that were doing pickup, we were backed up pretty far up to the Parkway from Coral Street, so we had to take a look at other options, and that's when we moved to Radio Park, which actually also provided more flexibility for access to transportation. And what's also listed on there is that Radio Park was actually one of the only place within the district that we were able to actually tap into free and reduced lunch program that provided free breakfast and lunch to all students participating through summer school. So we're really happy about that. And we continue to take a look at what we could do to ensure that structured literacy and explicit instruction was not only a part of the experience, but a continuation of what was happening from the general education classroom.
I would share one of the biggest things with the ESSER funding is we have added pre-K to our summer program, and the we can't talk enough about the benefits. We started it with one, and then was able to work with St. Clair to get another, and so there's students that just gives them a jump start to kindergarten.
Part of the grant reporting that we do several times a year includes actual numbers of participants of students from marginalized backgrounds, and we had part of our grant applications specifically did that. So our transitional kindergarten classroom has had approximately 20 some students of mixed students from different marginalized populations. So we've had some great success with that. Actually, can you go back one more? Sorry. The one other thing I wanted to talk about, which we'll talk about again, is down at the bottom, specifically related to Patton and some comprehensive supports. One of the data points you were discussing in the last presentation about this weird data number in first grade, fall to spring, is actually not a State College phenomenon. It is actually happening all over the state and all over the country, and we can talk about that a little bit more, but it was really exciting. Through our comprehensive supports, we were actually able to tackle that as a team this summer and explore that and what that could look like for the future of the district. So just some general perceptions from parents about how programming went. It's obviously hard to get a great sample to make a large, a true understanding, but for the most part, all of the surveying that I do every year does come back pretty positive. Anytime that we do get some different types of feedback, we obviously try to make changes to that. A couple years ago, we had to increase the time of camp because 4th of July fell. It was one of those things where we came to camp for like 2 days and it just didn't make sense. So we added an extra hour in, played around with how we can continue improving on curricular opportunities. And then once we started providing breakfast and lunch, that added into some extra time. So it ended up kind of being a little bit of wash, but it was a great response from families to have access to that food program as well. We started off with about a 4-hour program that eventually continued to grow up to 5 hours to 6 hours. And now again, with funding and other needs, we've slowly been trying to cut back a little bit to kind of see where that perfect fit is, given that the costs, and it's really difficult to budget for summer school. I can talk about that in a minute as well. Through some of the other federal program money, we've been including STEM education, so students were getting some additional STEM as a part of their experience as well. And we actually had that part of the program was outsourced when we started it, and then we brought that actually into our own curriculum and things a couple years ago. And then this was also part of ESSER. You had to also focus on literacy. Part of the state set-asides for ARP ESSER was specific focus on literacy, so we added in library instruction and book checkout so kids actually had access to books that participated. A couple years ago, again, we were on our second year of our ARP ESSER money for summer enrichment. I think since the very first day I started in my role here, I have been hit with families asking for world language instruction and chess. So we have those kind of in small places, but we did throw those out to families and received a really large turnout and experience for those, and a lot of really good feedback at that. In fact, we were in the State College magazine the first year for the World Language Enrichment Camp, and it's been really cool to kind of see that. But unfortunately, with the growing costs related to these programs and the lack of COVID relief money, these programs are not budgeted in the current fiscal year. And again, some additional surveys from families about the importance of these enriching events and how they can continue to help support in the summer. A lot of the feedback from families is that we want them and we would like to continue to get them. Again, some parent responses there that you can read. What I have really enjoyed about facilitating Champs Camp over the past couple of years is getting to work with building principals to really bring in teacher candidates for interviews to work with in front of students. Sometimes people are really good interviews, but then may have a different experience when they're in front of children, and then also vice versa. So it's been really cool to kind of see them interact with students in that way. I've really enjoyed getting to work with the building principals, them seeing some of the students that are going to be coming into their schools, making those connections early, but then also being a familiar face for when we may have day-to-day needs of the building. And again, breakfast and lunch has been awesome, and I just can't thank Megan Shaper enough for her team for helping to support that program at Radio Park. For me, my love is professional development and all of that piece, and given our second year with systematic supports from Patton, we had Dr. Jen Collins, who's the director of the MTSS state lead for Pennsylvania, come and work with us. She had the opportunity to start examining this data point that we've been kind of exploring a little bit and looking a little bit more about what we need to do as students are in the the winter testing period in first grade. Once they're finally tested on oral reading fluency, what we may need to be looking a little bit different at. So some of our lead teachers who are SCASD teachers got some training along with some paraprofessionals. We set up a plan and are actually going to be presenting on some of that data. We were asked to present on it in a conference in November, so there's a team that will be going to Hershey to speak to that. In addition, we had a really good opportunity to start exploring how we could continue building on these things, some additional professional development over the summer, and as a part of that, and taking a look at whether you want to call it vertical alignment, and I think the team the last presentation said it beautifully, a more horizontal alignment. When you take a look at curriculum from grade level to grade level, the importance of what we're doing in the intermediate grades and how that needs to continue to be taking a look at data and moving into the middle school. So I was really glad that we invited the secondary principals to come to a meeting with Dr. Collins to start reviewing MAP data and PVAS data, and saw very common similarities in the data pieces that we are now going to use as we've applied for systematic supports through Patton in the secondary world to continue getting some targeted approach to look at that a little bit more. So very happy that we had that chance in the summer as well.
So back when I first began to work with Jonathan and he shifted to, we began to talk summer program and we brought ESL in with the students from Title. What we began to realize before Michelle was on board with us is we could do similar processes, and instead of our special ed students being at a different school, just working on their goals, what would it look like if they got to be included in part of the Champs Camp and actually got to attend the same amount? So with the work of Jonathan in the special education department over the past 3 years, we've really provided an inclusive environment and provided a lot of our special education students the opportunity to not only receive support on their goals found within their IEPs, but also to be within a classroom obtaining the math and reading skills that they may be lacking. It's something we hope to continue to grow. Michelle will talk a little bit about ESY next, but it's been really a big win when you look at the last 5 years and the changes we've made for those students and bringing together systems. It's been powerful, and our summer program has been a big part of that, and then helping to make changes throughout the school year.
We've also pulled some numbers for you to review, to better understand the number of students who were participating and a general overview of those. And I think on the next page, we also have our fiscal status. So we were doing 6 weeks, and we started moving that back with financial needs to take a look at that. As I said, it's very difficult to budget for summer school because our faculty or contracted staff costs more than those that don't work for us, and we do have a lot of faculty that need their summers off. They've well deserved, and I totally understand that. So it does get really difficult to budget in terms of that. So this year we did go back another grade level just to kind of be able to support that. But you'll see that even if just comparison between fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24, that this year did end up costing us more money. We did have more money budgeted in through other federal programs to help support some of the growing needs, but a lot of those have since ceased. And depending on what the needs of the district are going to be moving forward, we'll have to talk about what that budgetary impact will look like for the next fiscal year. But it is budgeted locally for, at some capacity, it is budgeted for next year as well. So again, we want to keep looking at parent surveys, talking with our team leaders and figuring out what is going to be the best plan. We also want to be thoughtful of ensuring that students have access to summer and good programming, but one of the hard ways of measuring student success in only 4 weeks, especially when some students come late all the time or they're taking trips, it's really hard to gauge actual growth within just a 4-week time period. So we do rely a lot on the anecdotal notes from the classroom teachers that are working with them and parents. And to continue collaborating with special education, I think that there's even more opportunity for a similar program where students will get actually more support versus than what we may just be doing in ESY right now.
Doesn't matter to me. I didn't see this one here. So the history of extended school year are services for special education students that are experiencing either a regression in the skills or they're working on a skill that they need to be independent when they graduate from school. And so those decisions are always made by IEP team decisions, and that's been with the history of special education. But what we've begun to look at over the past several years before I was involved and then again this year is to really look strategically how can we align these supports with other programs, as both Jonathan and Danielle have referenced here. It has been nice over the past several years that we've housed these programs in the same elementary school so we can share supports across programs and also provide the lunch and breakfasts for some of our students. Students do continue to receive the services that they qualify for extended school year. So a student may receive learning support instruction in reading and math and also speech and language services. They could qualify for extended school year services for their reading and their math, but may not qualify for speech. So it's really based on the data that the teams gather throughout the year and across those extended breaks. Go ahead. really looking at the history of secondary programming, and I, again, will not read this word for word, but the goal of the secondary programming is, by the end of it, is really looking at what skills do our students need to develop to become independent in their life, whether it be a goal of college, of employment, of living, what skills do we need to develop to help them get to that? And so that is really where the focus is on for secondary. The next several slides kind of give you a little snapshot of the students that have participated in extended school year for this past summer. Knowing that we have found 194 students out of approximately 917 students eligible for extended school year services, parents can opt out of those services. So even though we are offering it and we are providing it, parents can decide that their son or daughter will not participate in those services. This outlines the teachers and the paraprofessionals and those locations that we provided those services. Extended school year is really outlined in two lengths. One is a 4-week section and one is a 6-week section at each individual level. And that's based on the skills and the services and the amount of support that each IEP team deem is necessary to support that student. And this really outlines the type of support classes that we have provided. So the autistic support, multidisability support classes, you actually have to make that ESY determination by the end of February for those students that have more involved services. And then as IEP teams meet the remainder of the year, typically for the learning support or the related services, that's when those determinations are made. The secondary ESY employment experiences is a more unique program for State College, which is great that we've had 39 students this summer participate in individual work experiences. And that really speaks a lot to the unique programming that State College has been able to provide their students. A sample of employers that participated in this are listed, including anywhere from Tractor Supply to a Tap Group Kitchen, YMCA, and Penn State are some of the leading employers that we have. The overall number of hours worked this summer was over 2,000 hours from our students that participated. So that is some great job experience to help them develop their independent skills.
Okay, and I'm going to talk about secondary summer school. The overview is our middle school and high school students for summer school. It's really focused on credit recovery, not doing well in a course. Specifically, our core subjects of math, English, science, and social studies is our focus. We have a structured approach where students come in to the high school, so middle school and high school students report to the high school for an in-person format. While they're working closely with our teachers, they're actually working on the coursework, which is online. So students can work on that 24/7 if they choose, but they're in school Monday through Thursday. You can pass there to the next slide. They're in from 8:30 to 11:30 to get some of that one-on-one attention. We do ask students to attend for 2 hours daily in that 3-hour window. So to be eligible for summer school, you have to earn an E. My day would have been an F when I was in high school. Not that I got many Fs, sorry. Disclaimer there. Don't check my transcript. Students do receive, like I said, support from our staff, from SCASI teachers when they're in the building. Next slide. They do have an opportunity to repeat up to 2 courses. If they earned an E, courses are taken one at a time and not offered at the same time simultaneously. We have half credit courses, 0.5, a year-long course, 1 credit. And one nice thing, when they do attend in person, they turn on the pre-testing module that lets them take an assessment to determine what they already know so they can move forward and not have to repeat and grind through that. It's summer already, so we want to make sure that they're focusing on mastery and getting on to the next unit where they need the most attention. So just to clarify, our secondary summer school programs were funded through district funds prior to COVID and the availability of ESSER funds. So we'll look at that moving forward. Some data here on our summer school. 25 students completed at least one course, 27 students completed in our core 4. Students that did not earn any credit was 2, and those students really just didn't attend. I think that's a common thread there, as we know the importance of attending, and we did grant 1 student an extension of those 25 students. Middle school data, I'm sorry, that was high school data. This is middle school data. 3 students completed at least 1 course, and 4 completed in our 3 cores, ELA, math and science, and 1 person did not complete a course. So just kind of maybe to wrap it up for the 3 different types of summer programming that we talked through today. So as we approach the end of ESSER funding, we'll continue to assess the effectiveness of these various summer programs and consider sustainable funding options. The administration will review this data, including a thorough review of past spending, and provide an update and recommendation to the board in the next few months. Anyone else wants to share?
Sorry, once in a while there's a crisis from home. I apologize. Yeah, questions?
Debbie had one.
Go ahead, Debbie.
It's good. I just had a question on the high school, summer school. I think I might have asked you this before independently, but I'm just wondering, like, do we not have the resources to offer this to students who get the D? Like, if you get a D in a class, right, you've barely passed it. I would hardly say that you've mastered the material. And so if what we care about is them being successful and moving on to the next level, it'd be nice to offer support to those students. I don't know if we can, but I'm just thinking about the incentive for a kid. You know, you're barely holding on, and if the only way you can do credit recovery is to fail it, you might just give up as opposed to attempting to get something out of the end of the year in order to qualify for summer school, like moral hazard.
Yes.
I don't know.
We've
like,
had many discussions
Yeah.
internally about that, and back and forth as far as what we can do in that situation, supporting students. Some of it has to do with discussions on grade replacement and what a student can accelerate a D to get to a higher level, that where someone who got a C may not be eligible to replace to a B, and so on. But we can take another look at that.
Just a thought. And I'm curious, what percentage of our high school kids who did qualify actually chose to do it? Was that on here or?
It was not. I can
Ish.
check.
Like, do you know?
I can check. I
Dan?
don't
Okay.
know.
No big deal. Thanks.
All right, I'm going to jump in. So I just want to say kudos. Like, you guys have really done a good job overviewing the summer programs. And, like, it's clear you've worked very hard to get to meet students where they are, to help them over the summer. And so, and also to kind of give that clear-eyed view of, like, this is what we are risking losing when these ARP-ESSER funds run out. So, like, I just really appreciate that overview to see, like, what we've done with that and kind of think through what do we want to do continuing forward from there. So both you in the presentation before mentioned Patan. Am I saying that right?
Patton or Patan?
Yeah, when you say Patton, I think of the township here, so I have to say Patan. So this comes up at the IU quite a bit, but it's actually housed in the Department of Education in Pennsylvania. Can you talk a little bit about this service and what it is?
Yeah, so Patton is the Pennsylvania Technical Assistance Network. It's funded by IDEA funding, and they have an east, west, and a central office, so we participate with the central programming. For years, Patton has been offering series or best practices related to MTSS, behavior, academics, scheduling, all different types of different topics. And schools used to go to them. Now they have kind of switched that up, and now schools are actually able to ask Patton for supports. So depending on what the needs are and et cetera, they may be directly related to schools who are, performing very, very low, what we would call CSI, TSI schools in federal programs world. There could be with special education support needs, since a lot of that does come from under IDEA funding. But the best part about Patton is it's what the same message is coming across the state, so we know that these are best practices. The work that we've done with ECRI, Enhanced Core Reading Instruction, 5 years ago now, started with a series at Patton, and they continue to provide us support We have a great working relationship with them, and by participating in some of these series, we actually also get funding. So I think we secured approximately $100,000 in the past 2 years of reimbursable costs related to some of the training and et cetera. So I think Danielle would agree, and probably anyone else that works with them, the collaboration that we have with them is really what has been helping to drive deeper discovery into data, talking about how we can continue building as a team, and trying to align resources and supports to better fit the district in its planning.
They change. Do you want to talk about their change, just briefly, how they now come to us?
Right. So at that point, we used to have to go to what they advertise. Now schools can just say, hey, this is really a topic that I want to talk about. They write up a plan, and then someone from either part of the state will reach out to the coordinator at that point, and you will develop a plan. It may be a short term, it may be a long term, but we currently have several in. We're on year 3 of our elementary series. We're turning that kind of into an intermediate for year 3. As I mentioned, we're just applied for the secondary support system, taking a look at MTSS structures in the secondary world, trying to provide more consistent, aligned resources and supports and processes, equitable access to curriculum and things in both buildings, in Delta as well. And then the high school's involved, and then we also are in a smaller cohort of supports looking directly at math intervention that the elementary math interventionists are taking a look at a little bit and kind of digging into the data. So one of that main reasons of going now forward, having a K-5 review of benchmark math elementary data is going to help to kind of dive into that a little bit more.
So what I hear you saying is that instead of where they used to have like workshops where people from various districts would come and they would talk about a topic generally, now they're saying, hey, let us know what you want to do, and they're actually like personalizing the development to the district.
It's
so
truly customized, yeah, and we're really awesome. It's really a great resource, and I'm glad that the collaboration, and the IU also works collaboratively with Patton as well, so you will be assigned a coach and a team, and meetings are scheduled, and we work to, if we have to pull teachers for a professional development day, we can use money from the grant funding to kind of reimburse the district for those costs. So those things are continuing to grow, and and it's also good to know that like the training that we're getting is the same types of training that when we go to conferences and we're hearing some of these best practices, these evidence-based practices around the state and around the country, that everyone's kind of working on some of these same issues together and not just in secluded areas. So.
Yeah, one of the biggest changes that Patton has over the past couple years is not a once and done training, but a ongoing support model to come in and provide that over a period of time, a period of years, instead of just the 1 or 2 day sit and get model.
Thank you.
Great. Other questions?
So I want to take this opportunity to thank you for your providing these reports for us. And most of all, for all the staff that were involved in working these summer programs. I know that some of them are off, some of them are working hard, but I appreciate everything they do to provide special things for our programming for our students. So it's appreciated.
Yeah, I have a high schooler who was in Champs Camp way before this evolution briefly, and it has changed drastically to, a wonderful experience that I've, continue to hear positive things about. So, and the integration with ESL just makes so much sense. So. Anything else from the board? Okay, thank you very much. Next up, we have the last CCL item, and that's an overview. Oh, sorry. I think we have a lot of the public here for this particular agenda item, so I was going to try and get through this item before we take a break. Is that acceptable to the rest of the board? Okay. So our last CCL item is an overview of the reflective discussions on mental health supports. Dr. Bucher and Ms. Bieber are here to provide this update.
Okay. I'm going to start this off. Given the audience that we have out here, I think it's important that we read what was in the memo to the board for those that are sitting here in front of me. Okay. So I'd like to start off with saying it is critically important to provide comprehensive mental health services and support to our students. And the district takes care and attention to that responsibility. Spanning from prevention to intervention, the district has adopted a comprehensive and holistic approach to supporting students and families that focuses on mental health and well-being. In providing services and support to our students and families, we also draw upon the knowledge of community partnerships with organizations and individuals with subject matter expertise to obtain additional guidance and support for our students and families. Unfortunately, recent tragic events have impacted our district and the broader community, including last May when we experienced the death of a suicide of a Park Forest Middle School student. Following a traumatic event, the district is well served to refine and adjust practices as well as look more broadly at the area of mental health and wellness support systems. We have had numerous reflective discussions to review the immediate and after incident processes, communications, and protocols. The narrative below, which we're going to share with you, provides an overview of those reflective discussions over the past few months and recommendations for moving forward to examine our systems of support.
So I'll continue with background. So the district utilizes a detailed and methodical response to addressing traumatic events, referred to as the flight team. This approach designates one individual in a lead role who coordinates the team, triages the response effort, ensures that all supports, resources, and systems are in place. This may include individuals and experts inside and outside of the district participating in the response, which this response may vary depending on the type of traumatic event. This approach is evidence-based and used by most of our surrounding school districts and schools nationwide. An overview of our reflective discussions that we've had. When a traumatic event occurs, timely communication is essential to alert the school district community, which includes students, family, faculty, and staff, before they learn of an event through an outside source. In the event of a student's death, it is important to engage the family in our communications and be sensitive to their needs. Our recent efforts in this area were well intended, but we recognized upon reflection that we could have better served the needs of the family and our school community. During a traumatic event, supporting students should be a considerable focus, and this includes ensuring that our students have access to school-based mental health support, recognizing that each individual may process trauma differently. This could include, for example, taking or escorting a student to a professional or to move to a more discreet location within the school. Our continued efforts for improvement should ensure that students are better connected to the support they need, including serving as a bridge to internal and external resources. When a traumatic event occurs near the end of the school year, reliance on those local resources and services is of particular importance to provide a bridge of care, and we will work to assist in connecting families to those outside agencies. With the student's death occurring during the latter part of the 23-24 school year, we recognize during our reflections that re-entry into the new school year may be challenging and continued care and support would be necessary. We recognize the need to monitor individuals closest to the tragedy, as well as screen for additional individuals who find themselves in need of support. Also of importance, we identified an increased need for transitional support for affected students moving into a new school building this school year. In addition to supporting our students, we must recognize the need of our faculty and staff during a time of tragedy, recognizing that their own personal experiences and trauma may adversely affect them during these times. Moving forward, we will increase our attention to connecting faculty and staff to counseling, resources, and other support. Our greatest partners are parents and guardians. As a district, we recognize that more dialogue is needed with our families about how mental health and technology are interconnected. District resources such as Securely can provide parents with a preview of their child's digital footprint on their district-issued device. A better understanding of such resources may encourage parents to have continued conversations with their children on using technology tools responsibly and what to do if their child is accessing or receiving inappropriate information. Safe to Say is a critical partnership with the Pennsylvania Office of the Attorney General, and we recognize the need for ongoing education to students parents, and guardians that tips are often submitted anonymously, which limits the district's ability to follow up and provide feedback to mostly anonymous tips. Working through traumatic events, we collaborate closely with external agencies and subject matter experts. Those engagements include involvement and collaboration in the immediacy of a traumatic event, as well as ongoing conversations. We will continue to engage with these partners for post-vention feedback and reflections to refine our systems and support. In the future, we would welcome any newly identified partners.
Moving forward, in addition to the efforts we outlined above, we want to examine our mental health systems, processes, and offerings more broadly. As we consider how to achieve that, multiple paths of exploration may exist. The district is supportive of an external assessment of our mental health services and programs and continues to explore qualified and available organizations positioned to facilitate this process. Such an assessment is the hallmark of an institutional best practice, and the district intends to continue these practices while improving our services. Our goal for an external evaluation would center on actionable information that would examine the district's efforts in this area against nationally based standards for school mental health. Alternatively, the district could explore utilizing a variety of stakeholder input by establishing a mental health community advisory committee. This could include parents, key district staff, district-associated mental health providers, and other external experts in mental health services who we solicit to participate. The advisory committee's purpose would be to assist the district in navigating a comprehensive evaluation of current mental health systems and supports. The district is continuing to investigate the availability of providers to assist us in whatever path we take moving forward. The superintendent and other administrators have several meetings set up in the near future to explore these options to better inform a recommendation to the board. Regardless of that exact approach, our goal of any in-depth evaluation would be to focus on the district's breadth and quality of existing school-based mental health support systems and supports, structure of MTSS processes that would include tiered interventions, school-wide SEL curriculums, and progress monitoring of Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports. Current board policies surrounding school-based mental health, including suicide awareness, bullying, and cyberbullying. Post-vention activities and resources to ensure ongoing monitoring of needs and necessary supports, and community conversations that reflect our growing need for student mental health support throughout Center County. While the above list highlights only a few focus areas, we recognize the importance of reviewing all school-based mental health systems and support. This effort would center on performing our due diligence to ensure our programs are of the highest quality possible. Our commitment to mental health and well-being is steadfast. Upon completion of various anticipated meetings, the administration will assess which of these pathways, using an external consultant to assess our mental health services or to establish an advisory committee is the most feasible. Thank you.
Questions?
Okay. Questions from the board? Yeah, Gretchen.
So if I understand it correctly, I mean, the word alternatively is being used. So does that mean that either one or the other, but not both, are being considered in terms of one being the external review and two being the advisory committee?
Yes, that is correct. I don't feel like it's beneficial to have a committee without first having the external review.
So it's more like the sequencing. So it's not that it's alternatively indefinitely, it's that alternatively to begin with.
Yes, and to already look at some of the other committees that we already have in existence. We do have a health and safety CAC that also responds to a lot of these things as well, that have parents and community members and
I've
outside
actually been
agencies.
on that committee for several years. And I don't think that, from what I read in the memo, I don't think that what happens in that committee in terms of mental health is maybe what the memo indicates it might be, because not much attention or time is given to mental health on that committee. And I think that there's some desire for there to be some kind of entity where people in the community who are specifically concerned with and want to contribute to the issue of mental health amongst K through 12 students would like to participate, which is different than, you know, the Health and Safety Committee, which covers like many, many different topics. And so I think in other words, like maybe this issue needs more attention than just, you know, a very quick 1-minute agenda item on the CAC for Health and Safety. Now, that was with Jean Canals, not with you, Stephanie, so I have no idea, you know, and I'm not on that committee anymore, but I was on it for several years, and I think that what I'm hearing from the community is that's not really what would be sufficient. It's more if there were something dedicated to student mental health where not only parents could come, but also people who are in that field, you know, who want to help and want to contribute to, you know, to this in the school district. So anyway, but that's good news that alternatively means let's start with the external review and see where we should go from there and do an audit of the current committees that already meet and where could this fit in. So that answers my question. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I think the administration in some of our discussions preparing for this meeting, the alternatively was about if an external entity of the appropriate quality and rigor and things cannot be identified, an alternative would be to set up this large stakeholder group agreement and potentially use the resource that was mentioned in the memo about national standards of mental health supports, and to work towards doing a process as that committee group should an external option not bear out. Would that be accurate?
That's true as well.
Yeah.
Until we have done some digging. At first, we were unaware of there being any organization that did this type of external review. There's no company that's just out there that does this type of thing, as far as I knew at the time, for public schools. There are organizations that do it for counties, universities, that sort of thing. So during this process, we really had to do some digging to the authors of various pamphlets and toolkits for suicide in order to find people with the expertise to even start this kind of process. So that's where we're at right now.
So is it looking likely that one will not be found? I mean, is that kind of where you're sensing is that this just doesn't exist?
It depends on all the criteria that we're looking for. Finding one organization to do it all, maybe not. Some focus in various different areas. Focus on suicide, not so much bullying, or focuses on suicide, not so much the mental health supports, or focuses on post-prevention, or just creating the toolkits. So there's various different expertise and various different things. So finding one organization that encapsulates it all is challenging. Yeah.
So you haven't found one yet, I'm guessing.
We found a couple
okay.
as of right now, but finding one that meets all the bells and whistles is going to be the challenge. We're going to have to talk to everyone on the board and administration to make that choice.
I guess I was trying to get at, like, have you given up yet? Or are you still?
Oh, no,
Okay.
no. We're
Okay.
still ongoing.
Still searching.
Still
Okay.
searching. We have a laundry list. We got to contact them on their schedules and things like that. So, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I think that brings up an interesting point, because looking at what any in-depth evaluation would focus on, there were really three pieces that I think we needed to address, and I agree. I'm not sure that there's any one organization that would do that. So I'm open to adding an S to the end of review and say we might need to do more than one, because there may not be one organization that focuses on all of this, but I'm pretty sure there are organizations, as you've found, that focus on the pieces of this that are really essential. And if we were to take more than one review and then also have a community work group of some kind to go through that, I think we would get a much more complete picture. So the three pieces that I'm most concerned about are, number one, how do we respond when there is a suicide attempt, or how do we respond in, sort of in the moment? What's our process there? What's our process after the fact? So obviously that's something that I hope we never have to go through again, but that's a process that I think we want to review. What's the district's response? And then, bullying and mental health are kind of this other bigger piece that I feel like there's a lot of different ways to approach that. But I agree with you. I don't think we're going to find one organization. So I think we need to be open to doing more than one thing.
Others? Peter?
Yeah, I would just agree with Aaron. That's all.
Okay.
Ditto.
Debbie?
I guess one thing I wanted to highlight as we look forward towards any, broader evaluation of mental health supports, is the importance of thinking about both the mental health supports within our school district and also the lack of adequate support within the community. Because I think we heard that a lot in the comments that several of you made this evening. Even if we didn't respond individually, we all read your emails. And as a general practice, we've been letting the president reply for the group. Doesn't mean we can't reply individually, but it is hard to reply, all 9 of us, to every single email. But please know that we all read them all. But I think what we've heard over and over again is that we don't have sufficient mental health support in our community as a whole. And so I think that this is a issue that we as a community need to tackle as a partnership, not just as the school district. The school district can't do everything. We can do a lot, and we may be able to do more than we've been doing, but we do a lot. And relative to other local school districts, you may be surprised to know that we do more than most school districts. But I think it needs to be a partnership with the community. So we need to have this conversation more broadly, I think, as well as here, so that we can see how we can all support each other and be partners in trying to solve this issue. Thanks.
So, as one person said out there, I think there's a lack of awareness of the supports that we do offer, and that we're not getting that information out to the public enough. So I think that is one thing that we're going to start with, just without the external review. I mean, that's something that has been told and repeated multiple times. I think our next board meeting, we're going to come with the supports that we offer within the district as a list so the board knows, and then as a way of sharing it out to the community, and then figuring out other ways that we can get this information out to our community as well. So that is hopefully the next step that we'll take just as a administrative group to share with the board.
Right, and to Debbie's point, while it's still in very early stages, the district often has, not always yearly with the pandemic, we've kind of been thrown for a loop, but oftentimes we've had community forums on various topics. So there's been some about race in the past. There were some about our SROs and youth in the community. And so this particular issue, our community's need for supports is something we've been talking about, try to pull together a wider group of our community to have a big conversation about, because the medical group entities in our community, they play a role in recruiting providers and getting people into our community to provide things like day programs for students transitioning out of a full-term hospitalization. That's a particular program there's a dearth of across the nation, and we certainly know that that's an important service. But those are medical providers typically that provide some of those programs. So to Deb's point, we're hoping that we can pull together some kind of forum as well to have some bigger discussions with the other entities in our community that, have a responsibility and play a role in trying to help us address these problems as well. Other board members, yeah.
I just wanted to say one other thing. I think it's great that we have mental health supports in the schools, and I think it's great for us to bring that information out to the community, as long as that doesn't take away from our recognition that something didn't work in this case, and we have things that we need to address and fix as well. Because I don't want to get away from the fact where we go, well, we have things and people just didn't know about it, because clearly that didn't rise to it didn't help. It didn't work in this case, and I'm not blaming anybody for that, but I want to make sure that, I also want to acknowledge Jen Black, by the way, who I can't imagine what she's gone through, and to come up and deliver the statements that she has. I mean, you can tell by the people who are here the kind of, how that's touched the community. So I want us also to keep in mind that although we have these things in place and we can add more, we need to pay attention to maybe what didn't work and what we can fix.
I want to echo what Gretchen said. I highlighted, as I was reading it, that term of alternatively, and so I'm really glad to hear the emphasis on sequence. Because when we're doing an external assessment, that's not going to be in isolation of our community. So that's going to obviously have a recognition of what kind of mental supports we have in the community. So having that external review, which I think would understandably take into account the community we live in and the lack of supports that are here outside the school district, I see them as connected. So thanks.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, Peter?
Yeah, definitely, agree with what Ann just said. And I think that we also want to make sure that whoever does the review or reviews, I'm like feeling Aaron on that, is that we make sure that whoever or whatever organization or agency does this, that they have that they have forensic powers to understand the inner workings of the district, our communications, et cetera, because I think some of these things can come down to details that are potentially difficult to uncover for an average person, and we want to, be sure that while being very sensitive to the confidentiality of everything that we are dealing with, that the people who are working with us help us just be as honest with ourselves as we can be. I think that that's going to be really important as well.
Okay. Other comments? Okay. We are going to take a break. I know there are some people that were interested in additional public comment, and I'm sorry if it wasn't clear. We don't typically do public comment after each area of our committee of the whole parts, but there is an opportunity for general public comment again before we start our consent agenda and the regular portion of our meeting. But we do need to get through this meeting of the committee meetings. We've got a pretty lengthy and involved section for tonight. So we're going to take a quick 5-minute recess, and we'll come back and complete that portion that includes facilities and finance. Okay, we'll be in recess for 5 minutes. Thank you. Sorry. I'm going to try again to reconvene the September 9th, 2024 State College Area School District School Board of Directors meeting. We're going to move on. Our next section of Committee of the Whole is going to be our Facilities Committee. We have Mr. Brown, Ms. Yoder, and Mr. Fisher to provide an update, well, maybe, an update on the district-wide facility master plan and Park Forest Middle School.
Ms. Yoder was listed on the memo incorrectly. I
Okay.
apologize.
Wow.
So,
I hope she's headed home then.
Just wanted to
Oh, no, sorry.
Just wanted to give you an update very briefly tonight. We have several very important things coming up with our facility projects, one of which is Park Forest Middle School project with a district-wide facility master plan. Next week, there will be a steering committee meeting. On the 23rd, there'll be a community forum prior to the board meeting. And then on September 30th, we expect to ask you to approve the Park Forest Middle School project from design concept to schematic design process. And we're excited for that very important step. Also want to share that the architects believe that we have actually done more during this design concept phase than is normal. And so I know we're all overachievers here in State College. And so we are moving forward so that the schematic design will be hopefully a little bit more easy to get through. So those are the things that we just wanted to share with you. It's in order to get to bid late next fall and then breaking ground in early 2026. So next week's report to steering committee and then following to community forum and then also in your board meeting will be the work that has happened since May when school let out. And the staff at Park Forest heard in service what that work was as well, and we've heard good positive feedback from that. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, Peter.
I think the only thing about this and with anything else that we're going to be talking about with Mount Nittany is that I would encourage us to make sure that we are looking on how to stack the Solar for Schools funding on top of the Inflation Reduction Act funding as we move along, because that can defray up to 80% of the cost for solar installation. And Representative Fiedler's bill is really good, and there's a process for it that can be kind of auxiliary to whatever we do with the IRA, but I just want to make sure that that doesn't get lost in the shuffle because it wasn't present in our memos.
Sure.
Yeah, and we've said a couple different times, that's why we've have put Baker Tilly on sort of a retainer, so to speak, to work with us to get through that inflation reduction application process and support us. Yeah. Oh, yes, thank you. I'm sorry. Quick aside. There was a phone located in the ladies' restroom, so if anyone has lost or misplaced their phone, please just let someone know up front.
I think it's mine.
Ah, there we go. Apologies for the aside. Okay, now we're back on track. Other questions from board members on the facilities plan or other things? Great. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Fisher. I know Mr. Brown's going to stick with us and move on to the Finance Committee, District-wide Facility Master Plan, Capital Financing Options.
Okay, so again, in 2 weeks at the 23rd, or maybe the 30th, one of our upcoming meetings, our financial advisor, Tom Beckett, will be here joining me and Joe Vigileone to talk about some financing options for our district-wide facility master plan, most specifically Mount Nittany L and Park Forest Middle. However, we want to make sure that there is money and funding capacity beyond those two projects as well. And so that's why we're working with him right now, especially Mr. Vigileone has been doing lots of analyses and preparing different scenarios for us to consider. What I wanted to spend a little bit tonight talking with you about is some decision points and factors to consider for you all, because I believe that you're somewhat of an inexperienced board as far as borrowing money for the school district perspective. And so there are some different factors, some decision points. It's just a different type of concept. Obviously, there can be connected some similarities to borrowing money for a household or even a business, but there are some differences as well. So I'm going to go through and talk through some of these bullet points. Please feel free to stop me because they're not necessarily connected, although some of them are. We've been planning, like I said, for our future capital financing by contributing to our capital reserve fund for a number of years. Currently, there is a balance of about $70 million in that capital reserve fund. That is great, and that could take care of Mount Nittany L and a great portion of Park Forest Middle. However, we do not want to spend that all at once. We want to be planful of that, especially if we want to use that to pay for the debt service in the ongoing years. One reason for that is we want to that fund balance, when our rating agencies see that fund balance, as they have over the last couple of times that we've been through that process, if they see a dramatic shift, that can be a red flag for them and an area of concern. So we want to be cognizant of that. Capital expenditures can be funded by the Capital Reserve Fund, or we can issue debt through bonds or bank loans, and then the Capital Reserve Fund can pay that debt service. Bank loans can sometimes provide a lower issuance and interest cost, and they are typically for shorter time periods than bond issuances. Investment income can be earned on proceeds of debt, especially if we have some of the debt that we issue and the timing we don't need to spend all of that in advance. But there are certain limitations. So that's some of the things that we'll be looking at as well. Issuing debt has certain fixed and variable costs. And these costs can be controlled in part by limiting the number of debt issuances. So we'll be looking at 1, 2, 3 scenarios for debt issuances, and then we'll explain how those impact our total cost as well. The timing of the debt issuance with spending can reduce the total expense. So again, the closer you borrow the money to when you really need it. So Crabtree Rohrbaugh is helping to develop an estimated draw schedule that would be needed, or a cash need schedule based upon how quickly construction would be incurring, because just because you build over 24 months doesn't mean you need 24 equal installments of cash to pay for that construction. Repayment of the debt can be scheduled to create a level debt service in order to not impact the district budget. So level debt service can have two meanings. It can mean that we pay $1 million every time we make a debt service payment, or it can mean that we're looking at all of our total debt service as a district. And some of our debt service is going to begin waning off or ending over the next several years. And so we may want to pay more interest up front so that we have more of a level debt service in the out years. So that because our revenue is generated by taxation, we can't necessarily increase taxes to help cover higher periods of debt service versus low. Rate at which capital reserve fund balance is used or spent, I talked about that, can impact the district credit rating. We are looking at the Inflation Reduction Act, and we'll also look at the Solar for Schools monies. Keeping in mind that when we're investing and looking to get the resources from the Inflation Reduction Act, we even get a higher rate of that reimbursement if we pay cash for those parts of the improvements or the parts of the project instead of borrowing the resources. So we'd be looking at that use of capital reserve for both of those projects as well. Total debt service capacity is being analyzed, again, as I started off, so that we're looking beyond Mount Nittany L and Park Forest Middle School. We want to have a long-term lens, as we have with our capital reserve set aside over many years here. Any questions? Yes.
So I was just wondering if the intention is to spend all of the money in that capital reserve fund, or if the intention is to retain some balance, like a rolling balance, just for other needs that we have along the way.
Yes. I do not intend to bring forward a recommendation. I may
Okay.
bring an analysis,
Okay.
but it would not be my intention or Mr. Vigilante's
There
that
you-
we would spend that whole $70 million
Okay.
at any one point
So
in
you're
time.
more responsible than I am, is what you're saying. Good.
Well, if you would spend that all, that would greatly reduce the total interest costs, absolutely. However, because of the credit rating issue, that would create potentially higher interest costs in out years, as well as then you're not being planned for long-term capital projects. So that's why that's what I'm trying to say is tonight that there are several different factors that can be have relationships, and we're trying to talk about those.
And some of those funds go to our ongoing maintenance projects at times, right?
Capital reserve?
Mhm,
No,
on
there's a
occasion.
separate capital fund.
Okay.
Mhm.
That's good to make clear.
Sure.
Yeah, Aaron, do you have something else?
I guess I was also wondering if we anticipate, after we've spent down a lot of that, if we anticipate the capital reserve fund growing again?
That's my hope.
Okay.
You're on the right track, Aaron. There you go.
So for history, oftentimes, several times over the course in recent history when, particularly when the state typically fails to pass a budget on time and then passes a budget much later, and we've already budgeted for less, if we wind up with unanticipated excess from the state funding, there are often times where we've put that aside then in capital reserve in order to build up that fund. So that's one source where we've had it. We had a couple years when some of the big towers went up downtown where we had a lot of transfer tax, which gave us an opportunity to also set aside additional funds to that reserve fund. So Mr. Brown is very fastidious in offering up those opportunities when they arise. And that's why over this long, my 9 years on the board, he's built up that fund to be as substantial as it is, preparing for Park Forest. So we appreciate
and
that
also
work.
we need, since the pandemic, we have not been able to be as consistent with an intentional transfer that was included in the budget as
Mhm.
well. And my hope is that we can, our hope, Mr. Vigilante and I, our hope is that we can get back to that state.
Yeah. Any questions on this side of the table? Go ahead, Debbie.
It's not a question, but a plug for, especially Aaron, because you're also on the CAC for Finance, but anybody else who would like to talk about this in a little bit more detail, we have a CAC for Finance meeting on Wednesday.
4
at
o'clock.
4?
Mhm.
And so that is on the agenda. So it would be another opportunity for those of us who are new to this to learn a little bit more about the process.
That's here, right?
Yes. Mhm. So attached to this memo is just some schedules about the Capital Projects Fund, the Capital Projects Bond Fund, and the Capital Reserve Fund, and we'll be going over those in more detail at the CAC.
Okay. All right, last call. Okay. So we have one last finance item.
We do. And it's actually a facilities item too, but we'll call it finance for tonight. So.
That's what I need.
So there's lots of materials for you attached to your agenda this evening about the solar power purchase agreement or the power purchase agreement process. And I will just, to get things started, I will just summarize that as of late this afternoon, I got a recent update. I would characterize that we are 99.5% home on our documents. In fact, the documents that you have attached to your agenda are outdated. There are some revisions that I have received, and we're still waiting for Prospect 14 to give final approval through their legal, but their developer, their owner, has said that these changes and documents should be in place. Direct Energy has agreed to everything that has been presented, so definitely we will, and now, there are not large changes, substantive changes between what you have and what has now been approved and accepted, but we'll be passing those out to the other organizations as well in very short order. But that is very good news. There's lots of other information in addition to those documents that was posted to the agenda later this afternoon as well. And I apologize for not getting those out earlier, but we're just, with the multitude of changes and the multitude of information, we wanted to get the best information to you and also collect relevant information for you and for the community. So I do have a brief PowerPoint presentation for you. I'm not going to go into as much detail as we've done in the past, but just some highlights and summaries. There are 11 organizations. It is that we all have collectively an annual electricity usage projected at 32.7 gigawatt hours. This would be annual electricity costs of $2.3 million. The $20 megawatt solar array that would be necessary to generate that much electricity would cost about $20 million to build ourselves, if we were going to do that.
All the members of the organization.
For all the
when we
members of
say
the
are.
organization,
Yeah,
yes.
just for the public to be clear.
Yes, no, thank you. The solar developer, Prospect 14, we have a contract on the table for 15 years with 2 5-year extensions. The solar PPA is at a fixed price with a 1.5% escalator over those time periods. The retailer is Direct Energy, has a contract of 5 years, and Energy Services ongoing agreement with Green Sky that's being presented it would be for 6 years. What is our return on investment over the 15-year project? And this is what where we're going to go with some actual costs and then also some projected costs. So our ongoing management proposal would be about $101,500 for a period of 2024 to 2026 until the PPA goes into effect. Then we had consultant fees, we have legal fees. That may not be this slide may not completely match my other slides, but it's probably about $40,000, $10,000 to $40,000 short. But it'll give us a close approximation. Ongoing management, like I said, is about $101,500 for a total of $419,000 with potential reimbursement for everyone of $60,000. Again, total with reimbursement nets to about $360,000, and this is for all members of the PPA, all 11 organizations. The 15-year PPA, so we have a $360,000 investment over 15 years is about $24,000 a year. Does the PPA save more than $24,000 a year? Well, these numbers are, these rates are for everyone, so 4.59 cents per kilowatt hour, and then fees of 2.2 cents in year 1, and then you see the estimated rates for year 10 and year 15. Potential savings in year 1, and these costs on the right are for SCASD, would be, as shown, would be about 0.081 or 8.1 cents. And so if we're looking at the working group, in total 32 million kilowatt hours, that cost is $352,000, and it looks like our payback would be in about 1 year. Our previous market conditions estimated savings between 1.5 to 1 cent. And so the market is averaging about 8 cents. And if you see the graph here shows what our rate would be over the next 15 years. And there's a trend line for it. So 15-year PPA investment over 15, the answer is yes. The district could save $150,000 over the first 5 years. All organizations would be about $250,000 per year. So that is a much greater savings than the $24,000 per year of the upfront investment in our upfront fees. I went through that pretty quickly, shared a lot of information. We've shared a lot of information previously. Obviously, Peter and Gretchen can share anything if I can't explain it in a way that's understandable to you.
Randy, do you want to go through, do you want to take questions on this first, and then were you going to go through some of the other things about the legal fees prior to the voting item later?
We can do that. Yeah, let's take questions to this point, yes.
Okay. So really quickly before we begin the discussion, just in general on the PPA, on behalf of the board, I want to thank Pam Adams, Randy Brown, John Franek, and their staff, as well as all the professional staff from the participating PPA members. This endeavor, at least in regards to the consolidation of multiple municipal entities, is a first of its kind in Pennsylvania, as best we know. And as such, it's involved a multitude of unexpected circumstances, which elected officials have tasked our professional staffs to work through. All the borough managers, township managers, and so forth that have been involved have been thoroughly professional and willing to tackle this novel project. So our community is very fortunate to have such dedicated civil servants, and I really want to thank all of them for their commitment to this project, which is pretty unusual and a little bit outside their regular everyday. So I just wanted to say that before we start. Questions overall on the PPA and return of investment? We'll start there. Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, there are two things that I want to address before people ask questions. And one is to address a question that has come from a couple of fellow elected officials as it relates to the school district, and one of them has to do with the $20 million cost of a 20 megawatt array, which I will take first. That does not include operations and maintenance that would have to be done. It does not include things like having a master account in PJM, and a municipal or local government entity in Pennsylvania cannot own and operate an array that is bigger than 5 megawatts. So the University Area Joint Authority has the largest municipally run, owned solar facility in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and as far as I know, that is restricted by state law. So our ability to do that, as far as I know, in the most recent law that I've looked at, we would not even be able to do it. The second thing is that I had a really productive conversation with Ferguson Township Supervisor Omari Patterson, who has been, for a local elected official not in the working group, has been one of the much more engaged people. And he asked me if we would be able to use the Solar for Schools money to go into the PPA. And having read the bill, I said, I really don't think so, because we aren't owning and operating it, but maybe there's something that I'm missing. So I reached out to two folks, one in DEP, Louis Crack, and then Abby, I think, Connor, who is in the Office of Critical Investments for the governor, and the answer is no. They both said you're not able to do that. So that was raised by Mr. Patterson. It has also been raised by sort of members of the public. And I just thought it would be good to show that we are doing our due diligence to show that we want to use solar for schools, but we cannot use it in this case, however much we might wish that we could. That's all.
Others, yeah, Aaron?
I just wanted also to mention my perspective here is that I came onto this, of course, as a board member who's never voted on anything related to the PPA, so I had a lot of catching up to do, and I needed a lot of information. I watched the recording of the last work group meeting, and I have to say, every question I had was answered there. So if there are people who have these lingering doubts, if there are people who are confused, I cannot encourage enough to either attend or watch one of these work group meetings, because they just laid it all out. And one of the things I want to point to is the fact that in conversation during that, Mr. Brown pointed out, we don't typically put a not to exceed amount on legal fees. And that actually changed my perspective completely to, oh, right, it's a bill. Like we have a bill that we need to pay. We don't typically operate in this way. And so I'll reiterate what I said before. This is not typical business anyhow. This is not how we typically operate. And actually, you know, to people who are really skeptical and I keep hearing, well, what's the point of a do not exceed if you're going to exceed it? Well, one, we didn't exceed it because we haven't actually approved to pay it yet. But two, we don't typically do it that way. That's not how we deal with legal. I can't just, you know, we don't have a set amount that we say, all right, Mr. Etter, we've reached our peak. You can go home now. We have no more that we can spend on you, right? That's not how we do it. That's not how you do legal. We're paying our bills. So again, if you're interested, watch the work group meeting. I just think it clears everything up for me.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Other comments?
I just want to add on to what Peter was saying, just because we can't use the solar, remind me the name of it.
Solar for Schools.
Solar for Schools in this situation, that doesn't mean we aren't going to investigate using it for other opportunities, right? So it's like, we cannot use it in this case, but that doesn't mean we're not investigating how we can use it.
Correct, because a reminder is that when we went through this whole process, we had to determine the percentage of our power amount that we wanted to participate in this project in, and there was a lot of debate about what that number should be, and it certainly wasn't supported to be 100%. So we supported 80% of what our current needs were, but that was 5 years ago. So we've grown, we have more buildings, so we have anywhere from 20 to even more percent of what energy we need to utilize, that we can then utilize the solar power for schools to kind of supplement that and cover those costs in those other areas. So we're not buying all of our power through the PPA, excuse me. Yeah, Dan.
Well, I was just going to bring up in a conversation I had with Randy as well, we don't own as a district enough land to even build a solar array to cover what the PPA is going to provide, right? So, people that might want us to go that route, we're going to spend a ton of money. We now have to acquire a large swath of land, so it's not as easy as everybody makes it out to sound.
And to add to that, ironically, in this literally today or yesterday's PSBA brief, there was an article on another school. They said it was in Central PA, but it's not close to us. Where was it called?
Steelton High Spire.
Steelton High Spire, that sounds right. They did do a PPA of their own, so they did not consolidate with other organizations, but it is a PPA. They have hired someone else to build and manage the array because, as Peter pointed out, they're not able to, hold that themselves. It has to be someone else who can build a big enough array to meet their needs. So, yeah, you got it. Yeah, go ahead.
And, just to pile on to all the things that we considered in this case, in the estimation very early on, which was pre-Inflation Reduction Act.
Correct.
Trying to figure out a distributed energy system that would provide the kind of power and the rate per kilowatt hour that we wanted, we could not see a way to do that without aggregating our power into something that could be supplied by a third-party developer. And the only organization with the land asset that could have housed it was the State College Borough Water Authority, and they were not going to give up their land to do it. So I just think that they're like these zombie questions that come back, and they have been dealt with like 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm. All right, Randy, do you want to do the next step?
Sure. So on page 4 of the memo, I just wanted to go over the consultant and legal cost summaries with you once again. For consultant, it was just shy of $70,000, and we've paid essentially all of that. There were commitments, and I don't want to. Again, let's just rehash one more time. The reason that we were doing the commitment to begin with is no one had any idea what kind of dollars and cents we were looking at for those fees. And so that was a way to measure. But then when we got really into it, it was like, well, it's immeasurable at this point in time anyways. But we've had collectively commitments that have been supported by the other organizations for $160,000. We've paid $125,88. We've incurred an additional $168, which that does include another $40,000 for remaining closing costs from the last billing period, and I'm estimating will get us to next week, or what I'm assuming is when we get the final documents. And then there is potential reimbursement in the amount of $60,000 if we meet 3 markers. And so the legal then is $228. So we're just shy of potentially $300,000 across all 11 organizations. The SCASD portion of that, of the legal is $137. The consultant is in the $30,000 range. So we're around 160-ish, between 160 and 170 in total for the district. I'm sorry, no, the 137 is consultant and legal. I apologize.
There's been a lot of numbers to pull apart and put together and pull apart and put together again.
So, and it's also now after 10 o'clock, my favorite time to address you
I
all.
know, it's hard. So questions on legal fees? Yeah, Dan?
Do we have a schedule of when other entities are planning on approving their portion of the legal fees? Do we have an idea?
Say, do we?
Like, so I know that they
I've
reimburse
given them
us.
all estimates.
Okay.
Yes, and we've not heard that they're not planning to approve them.
Perfect.
And so far, everybody has paid what we've billed out. And again, just to repeat, I haven't heard that. I mean, there have been lots of questions and there have been concerns similar to what we've dealt with here. But I have not, Peter and Gretchen, I don't know if you've heard, in talking to others, if you've heard concerns that folks are not going to continue and agree to pay.
No, and I would say I probably talked to about 15 elected officials about this in the last 5 days, and there are people, and as the working group chair, I fully recognize, and I said this at the working group meeting, that today, hearing from some people. I guess I would call it discomfort with the nature of these 2 words, at risk, and what that meant, that in retrospect, some more thorough or targeted communication about exactly what that meant may have allayed some angst that we have now. And I don't mean to say that the angst is, unwarranted or something like that. It was, you can look at, I think it's on page 2 of the May 22nd, meeting minutes. It's there, but that's not a detailed explanation. And so, I as the working group chair, I take some responsibility for that, and recognize that, Mr. Brown's explanations of that tonight in the working group meeting, I think it make a lot of sense. And, here we are. And I have to say, that I think the explanations are pretty fulsome, and I look forward to. I mean, I'm not like, yay, awesome, we get to pay $137,000, but we will be paying this because the contracts at the end of this were put together to protect us, so that we get a good payback on an affordable, long-term, very stable, predictable electricity price.
So you will be asked later in the evening to give authorization to pay those bills into that amount. And the amount is for everyone because we're paying those bills and then we'll get reimbursed.
Debbie?
So, I guess my remaining question then, since this seems to be the time to ask questions. Your estimation is that we're 99.5% to the end of these documents. And so, what is the rush to authorize payment of these fees now? Can we push it off to the 23rd when we actually have the documents in hand. Because I personally, as one of 9, would feel much more comfortable authorizing payment of the fees when we have the final product in hand. Because to me, at risk means that the lawyer was kind of speculating, right? That if he produced the final product, and I understand we're depending upon other entities to create this as well, but that if he produced a final product, that we would see that it was a worthwhile investment, and therefore we would be interested and willing to pay the fees. That's sort of where I feel like I'm at. If we get a final document that's actually complete, that does protect our interests, and given those estimates of return on investment, it's only an estimate, then it seems like a good investment. But if we don't get the documents, or if the fees keep going up again because it takes 3 weeks because we thought it was going to be done, but then it wasn't, that's where I get concerned. So that's sort of where I'm at currently. If I had forced to vote on it tonight, I'm not sure if I can say yes, but if I could wait until the documents were done, I feel like I could more comfortably.
So I have a couple comments. One is you were buying a product, in my mind, which is a document to vote on. Even if the documents had been done in shorter order and less cost, you may not have liked the outcome and may not. So getting a complete document is not necessarily a deal that you would, that the board would vote yes to.
This is true.
Okay.
But there are some of us who at the last meeting were concerned about the legal fees, who might have pulled the plug and pulled our support of the process if we had known that legal fees were climbing. And so I wasn't given that opportunity to express that.
I understand.
And so the only way I can express it is now.
Yeah, Anne?
Yeah, I actually found the discussion of the legal fees at the August 28th working group meeting. And when she talks about scope change, I think that actually was super clarifying. It's around like 1 hour, 3 minutes into it. And so I do think that, I mean, I feel like that clarifies that amount of difference that we were seeing in a really, it was really illuminating to me. And so I understood those changes as being a result of this kind of historic integration of so many different entities. And so when we are at 99.5, is it the lawyer's Betty Dupree?
Betsy Dupuy she's the representative from some of the municipalities.
Right, and they required that kind of review, and that review then compounded the legal fees. Peter and Gretchen, is that right?
To some extent, yes, but not to a large extent. The largest extent was the developer and the distributor changing their mind, coming forward and saying yes, and then saying, oh, no, we really didn't mean that. I mean, that happened multiple times. And then they went stone cold silent, which made the process longer. We didn't necessarily incur fees whenever they were silent, because the clock only ran when our attorneys were working, but there had to be some catch up again and some regurgitation. So, but there were several times. In fact, last week I had to have a conversation with the attorney and the consultant, and there was a very serious point in time where I was concerned. Yes, there will be documents, but I'm not sure that you're going to agree to them. So that's one of the things that I need to that I look at this as the documents as being a product for you to be able to vote on. And just because we got a document and a product doesn't mean that we could all agree that it was the best step forward, because there was a lot of liability. The rates and fees have been negotiated for a very long time.
Correct.
It was more of the ownership and the liability that's being assumed. And again, this is very new, and it's new for both the developer and the distributor. And we didn't have a lot of choices in the distributor because we live in central Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Okay, that's super helpful.
And I would like to add one other thing. We've been the lead organization, and so there is also something to be said for taking the first step. And so that's why I asked board leadership to put the legal fees on for this board agenda as well.
Yeah. Oh, well, Gretchen hasn't had a chance yet, so go ahead.
I was going to sort of ditto one thing Randy just said, because I told you all in the COG report that I had attended the climate committee meeting at the COG today, and there was substantial discussion about the fact that SCASD and the borough are two of the major actors, and that the votes by those two entities will indicate to other entities whether this is being supported or not. It's kind of analogous, if this is helpful, it's kind of analogous to when SCASD cancels for weather, because everybody else looks to SCASD, and they talk about this at the COG, and what SCASD does, they do. And so I think that this is really analogous to that, and they're sort of waiting to see what SCASD is going to do. So I never talked about the agenda timing with Randy, but I completely agree that it just makes sense now. The other thing that I know Aaron kind of said this, but I guess I'm going to ditto a little bit what Aaron said too. Deb, you had said that you were never given the opportunity to vote on that at-risk thing. And the thing is that going back to what Aaron said, we normally don't vote on any legal fees. I mean, ever. And so if the line of thinking is that we should be voting to okay and confirm approval of all legal fees, then that's a whole different discussion, and we can have that. But picking one item and saying, well, this is the one, and because of this, I'm not going to support it now. First of all, that was the past. This is a vote tonight, and so it sounds like punishment almost, which is, I think, not how the process is intended to work. And then the other thing is that, yeah, that's a whole other discussion if we want to start to vote on all legal fees, because we've never voted on any legal fee since I've been on the board for 9 years. So this is truly an exception.
Carlene?
Yeah, I just have a question. Kind of like Deb brought it up, and I was just thinking about it. These are estimated costs, right? Is there a possibility that we're voting on this amount and it'll be more?
I've built in what I believe to be, after talking with the attorney just last week, an amount that would be a maximum. I can't guarantee it, but I've been doing this for a while now with the attorney, and I tried to gauge from him how much more time. And last week to the working group, I told them that I thought it would be another $30,000 in addition to what we've been invoiced, and I was high by a little bit. And then in talking with the attorney later in the week, then I built in another $10,000 for additional fees.
Okay, so you're saying that it could also be less?
Yes.
Okay.
Aaron?
I just want to make a comment that the way that I see a vote on fees like this is that we are trusting Randy to make a good decision and trusting Randy to spend the money here, and I do. So to me, that's really, we were basically giving him permission to pay the bill when it comes. So whether that comes in 2 weeks or not, he's not going to pay it until he has it, right? So if we vote to do it now, he's not going to cut a check tonight, but when the time comes, he has permission to do it.
And the attorney has waived $70,000 worth of costs to this point.
Yeah, Gretchen?
I mentioned that today in the meeting, that because I think, like, Pam didn't even have it in the slides, and I said, we might want to include the fact that they credited $70,000, because in case any electeds throughout, the region are wondering, well, are they acting in good faith? They are acting in good faith. That's why they credited $70,000. So they're trying to work with what we have, and they know the concerns of the electeds, and that's part of the reason, I'm assuming, why they credited the 70,000.
And if I can, just really quick, I think one of the things that that we're doing now is, and maybe this makes, I'm not going to try to speak for you, but you know, it might make you a little bit nuts, is that we have to deal, like we've constantly dealt with a level of ambiguity, you know, in this sort of this work. And managing that ambiguity now and just kind of accepting it is to vastly reduce ambiguity later, right? Like, it is a 4.59 cent, you know, 4.59 cent per kilowatt hour rate with a 1.5% escalator on it. And then the management of risk around it and who holds the risk, it is in those documents for us to understand and for us to own and for the counterparties to own. But our price ambiguity right now, just to be like, well, who's doing what? Like, we just have to pay for that now and accept it or not, you know? And like, I know what I'm gonna do. And other folks can accept it or they can not accept it and vote accordingly. I just think that we need to vote on it.
And something that I should have also said that's not related to the legal fees per se, but related to the rates. That 4.5 whatever goes into effect in 2026 when we start using that energy, or when that energy is produced
Delivered, yeah.
and delivered to the distributor. And so that's 2 years from now. And right now, rates, one of the other organizations shared their estimated rates that they received, and if they want a 2-year lock, it's approaching 10%, 10 cents. I'm sorry. Yes.
Right. So I had several things to say, but many of you have already covered it, so I will try to be succinct and short. I do want to say I appreciate the work that our new board members put in to get up to speed. I know that that was a lot of documents. It's been a 5-year process. And so I really feel like you did your due diligence and did a lot of work to make sure that you understood. You've asked questions of leadership or Peter or Randy or people in the work group to get those answers, and I think that's really important. I'm glad to hear, Peter, that several people approached you today to get clarification, because I think in this last recent time period, we haven't seen that of all of our elected officials. And there's been a couple instances of some people not taking that approach, which I find kind of unfortunate. I just want to say, not only do those actions erode the trust between governmental organizations when we're trying to work through an intergovernmental process, but it results in misinformation sometimes being provided to the public. So with such a large project, it's really incumbent on every public official to perform their due diligence, which I really appreciate how well our board members have done that. And they need to make those kinds of inquiries before making pronouncements. So it's a little bit, you know, like how we teach our students to use primary resources, you know, go to the primary source, and also make sure that you're making sure you have reliable sources, because otherwise it becomes a game of telephone and the story gets really distorted. So I just wanted to remark on that, and that how much I appreciate all the work that's been done to go into this. Process-wise, this is on as a voting item, so if the board wanted to change that, when we come to that item, some kind of motion would have to be made. Otherwise, it's on the agenda and we will vote on it. And that's all I have to say about that.
You're voting on
The legal fees, correct, sorry. If I
And
wasn't clear, the
At the
legal
next
fees.
meeting, well, I just wanted to make it clear as well, and the next meeting will be the participation in the program, meaning the acceptance of the documents, in addition to the ongoing management contract, an MOU that will be collective with all of the participating organizations, and a resolution that will be adapted. It has more of a municipal feel, but it will be adapted for the school district as well.
Thanks, Randy, for that clarification. Okay, that concludes our committee of the whole at this late hour. Before we move on to the consent agenda, we have another opportunity for additional public comment. So if anyone is here in person or joining remotely that'd like to make comment, you're welcome to do so. Thanks for your patience. We had a big agenda tonight.
Again, I'm Jennifer Black from Half Moon Township. I wanted to just say right now that even though I've come to 2 board meetings with lots of concerns, and I don't want you to think that I don't love this school district. I volunteered at Panorama Village when I was at Penn State. I watched Teddy Coral put on music programs on the stage that was right there. I student taught at Matternville when Linda Colangelo was president. I mean, this school district is important to me. So please don't take what I'm saying as criticism of our district, but I feel like because I love this district, we really need to make some changes. On the whole, we have had an amazing experience as a family in this district. My kids had an amazing time at Grayswoods, and my youngest loves going to school there every day. My oldest has had amazing counselors at the high school, and we've dealt with a great assistant principal there. We've met so many amazing teachers and wonderful teachers, and I know I'm using the word amazing a million times, but it's true because they really, truly are. We have had a wonderful experience. However, as you know, we had a terrible experience happen to us this past year. And I, of course, can't say that any action or inaction by any specific person or group would have prevented Abby's death. I can only say that we didn't have all of the pieces of the puzzle. The information about the prior suicides in Abby's friend group, the discussions that Abby had with the counseling office, the red flags raised by teachers, which we didn't find out about until months later, which actually was a disciplinary incident for my child who has never, ever been in trouble at school in her life. There's no bigger red flag than that. In addition to the knowledge that Abby's older sibling had been dealing with suicidal ideation and mental health issues for the past year and a half, all of these pieces of the puzzle were there, but they were held by someone else. And for whatever reason, the pieces weren't put together. They either didn't think that they needed to be put together in a certain way, or maybe they were put together but they weren't shared with anyone else. But because we as parents didn't have the full picture, we weren't able to see the state of crisis that Abby was in. And we as a district need to do a better job of making sure the puzzle pieces are not dropped and that they are put together in a timely manner. In order to make this happen, I do fully support an external review in whatever breadth we can get. If it takes 3 different groups to take care of this, then 3 different groups will do it. Because without our children in this district, we don't have anything that we've discussed on the agenda tonight. If we don't have our students with us, then it's all meaningless. We need clear communication amongst parents, teachers, counselors with a focus on finding a reliable way to make parents aware of emergent mental health crises within their children's peer groups. We need transparent policies and procedures within the counseling department and within schools regarding record keeping and accountability, especially in regards to how and when parents are notified of concerns. We need to provide programs, in-school resources to allow those suffering with pervasive mental health concerns, such as severe depression and anxiety, to have a successful school experience. Abby and I shared many of the same interests and personality traits. We both loved relaxing in the hammock, creating jewelry, binge watching Grey's Anatomy and Dance Moms. We are both fiercely loyal to those we love and thoughtful with gift giving. One more trait that we both share is our intense need for fairness. Abby could not stand when something happened that wasn't fair or just. When people improperly used her older siblings' pronouns, she flew into a rage in the privacy of our own home, because of course she would never do that in front of anyone else in public. When Abby saw me crying and heard me tell a story of someone who, in her eyes, had unfairly blamed me for something, she hugged me tightly and assured me that it just wasn't right. The most unfair thing of all, and the most unfair fact I will ever have to accept, is the fact that Abby is no longer here. That's not fair. It's not fair that my kind, witty, intelligent 17-year-old will graduate a year later than their peers due to the crippling anxiety and depression they've experienced that has kept them from attending school. Life throws many things our way that aren't fair. But because fairness was so important to Abby, I'm going to do all in my power to see that our kids are given the best chance. And that means making sure that both their educational needs and their mental health needs are met. Because if our kids can't get to school, we can't provide them with the exceptional SCASD education they deserve. Just a few more things in response to the discussion earlier. We did know what resources were out there. We did have resources in the community that we utilized. It didn't work. And again, I'm not saying that we're not to blame. I'm not saying anyone is to blame. What I am saying is that we knew the signs to look for. We knew what to do if our child came to us with suicidal ideation. We'd experienced being inpatient. There's no lack of resources for us as the problem. Middle school and high school students should not be expected to seek out these resources on their own. It's just not logical. That's not how middle school and high school students work. So it's not that we don't have the resources, it's that the way that we're using them right now is not effective. And again, if we don't know all the signs, then we can't even utilize the resources to begin with. It's all a moot point. Because we didn't know that Abby was in crisis, because somewhere along the line, information did not make it to us, we have to live with the greatest injustice of all. So as you go through and think about what you're voting on, I want you to think about my bracelet that says perspective. I made this when my oldest was going through the worst of their depression and anxiety. Because as an educator, I always thought my child would never be the one that was falling behind in school. My child would never be the one to get a truancy letter in the mail because they hadn't attended. That wasn't my kid. That wasn't me. But I have this perspective bracelet to remind me that it doesn't matter if my kid is the top of the class. It doesn't matter if my child graduates a year late. It matters that my kid is here. And for the longest time, that's what kept me going, that perspective, that knowing that I still had my oldest child. But then when we lost Abby, it threw us for a loop. We had to reassess everything, and again, we've come back to perspective. We We're doing what we can with what we can, but I want you to take the word perspective with you and think about, in all that you do, does it really matter about any of the other things you're voting on or anything else if we don't have the kids, if we don't have the mental health for our students? They can't be in school and they can't be getting the education that you guys are working so hard to make sure they have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other individuals for public comment?
Jen Black, I want to thank you for being able to come here and do these things. It's important and it's powerful. Perspective. I'm a grown woman whose 13-year-old friend killed themselves in middle school. It matters. These children will take this event with them for the rest of their lives, and it will give them perspective that I hope they remember to take action on behalf of other children so that they have the benefit of a full life. I also come as a former consumer analyst for New York State Electric and Gas, where I was charged with writing briefs for the Public Service Commission, detailing what went wrong, or what we did right, or what 95% of the time was human failure. And when I start hearing the P words, policy, practice, procedure, postvention, these bring me to the deflections that we use to justify what has happened. And yes, we should do an external investigation, but more importantly, we should deeply, and I implore you to, deeply investigate internally the humans entrusted with our children. If we are not willing to take action with bad actors who have been here for years, well, I'm sorry, but all of this is for naught. Do I sound angry? Sure, I am. Because here I am, 40 years later, and we still have children taking their own lives. That makes me angry. But please look inside, and I want to clarify that while we live in Ferguson Township, our elementary and middle school experience was in Patton Township. And there is a common thread of lack of accountability in one particular area that I implore you to look very closely at. Because as our students feel bullied by the very people they're supposed to report to, no, thank you. We need to do better. And if a person or persons cannot uphold their duty to be professional with our children and care for them, we must take away that paycheck that they're getting for their disservice.
Thank
So
you.
please, take a look closer. Thank you.
Do we have anyone online that's waiting to potentially make a comment? Okay. Anyone else in person? Okay. We're going to move on to the consent agenda. We have several items which will be addressed with a single motion to approve all. However, to simplify questions and discussion, we'll go through each category. So first up, we have approval of minutes. Any concerns or questions? All good? Usually we are. Finance and personnel, we have some HR issues, some students going to CPI for some programs that we don't offer, some licensing of the drama club performance for Mount Nittany. Any questions? No? Okay. Instructional programs, pretty straightforward. A renewal of our Penn Highlands agreement and St. Francis agreements for dual enrollment are included here. Okay, so that's pretty routine. Last up, almost last up is physical plant. We have some routine service contracts. Any concerns? Okay, I think that covers all sections of the consent agenda, so I will accept a motion to approve the consent agenda as listed, 10 through 13.
Buck, so moved.
Huff second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Again, any last questions? All right. Board members, those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, the consent agenda has passed. Pardon me. We'll move on to action items, starting off with agenda item 14A, a motion to approve Act 34 booklet for Mountain Elementary project. This is shown in attachment 14A.
Huff so moved.
Colby second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? We preliminary saw this at the last meeting. Great, so it's pretty straightforward. Any public comment on this action item? Okay, board members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That item is passed. Agenda item 14B is a motion to approve elementary playground remediation at Coral Street and Radio Park Elementary Schools, shown in attachment 14B.
Huff so moved.
Miller, second.
That's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? We had some discussion on this at the last meeting of some different options, and the recommendation has been brought forth by administration to level these areas. Yeah, Gretchen?
Yeah, I just want to say quickly, I know it's late, but the whole concept of the natural playgrounds, I don't know that everybody got it. And so I think that that's just something we didn't think about back then, is that we would need education and professional development on how do you maintain natural playgrounds, how do they evolve over the years, maybe retouching with Metcalf, and we never did that. So I just wanted to sort of say why I'm going to vote the way I'm going to vote, and thank you.
Okay, my understanding, I do think we had some discussions with Metcalf, and I was also part of that process, and I do recall some questions about the concerns about mud and sliding, even at the early stages of the development of the project. And I recall Studio Ludo being pretty honest about saying, yeah, that may happen, and that's part of the experience. I think the challenge that we've realized in real time is that while if it was our backyard, it was supervising our own children, that's one thing to make that choice. But when we have a lot of children running around, we've got some different challenges that may be unsustainable in this particular environment. I still continue to really support a lot of the aspects of the natural playgrounds. I think they bring a lot forward for our kids, but it seems like this particular feature, just to me, clearly from the principals, wasn't really working in a positive fashion. So did I see a hand on this side? Okay. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I'm aware of many natural playgrounds that are even larger than what we deal with and have more children playing on them than ours, like big public ones in Baltimore, for example. So that's not what it is. Just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, well, it seems that's a point of difference of opinion. Any other last comments? Okay, so we have a motion in a second, right? Forgive me, it's too close to 11 o'clock. And it seems like we're finished with questions and discussions. So is there any public comment on this item? Thanks. Okay. Board members in favor, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Okay. That item is passed. Agenda item 14C is a motion to accept a bid for Phase 1 of Panorama Village renovations. This is shown in attachment 14C. So as we've moved the IT department over to the renovation at the north building, we're now looking to renovate that space.
Miller, so moved.
Colby second.
Great. So questions and discussion about that particular item?
That's good.
Okay. Any public comment for this item? Okay. Board members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, that item is passed as well. Agenda item 14D is a motion to approve legal fees for the power purchase agreement. This is shown in attachment 14D.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. We've had a lengthy presentation earlier in the meeting during our committee of the whole. Any follow-up questions that were unresolved? Any public comment on this item? Okay, board members in favor, please raise your hand, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, that item is passed. That concludes our agenda for this evening. Looking ahead to future agenda meetings, we have, as Deb mentioned, we have a CAC for Finance coming up this Wednesday at 4 p.m. here in Panorama Village Boardroom. There's also a Google Meet for that meeting if you need to have a remote option. Tuesday, September 17th, 2024, we'll have a Policy Development Committee at 1:30 here in Panorama Village Boardroom. Monday, September 23rd, 2024, we have District-Wide Facilities Master Plan Community Forum. That's 6 p.m. in Panorama Village Boardroom. That will be held just prior to our regular board meeting that same evening at 7 p.m. Monday, September 30th, we'll have the Action 34 hearing for Mount Nittany Elementary Additions and Renovations Project. That's at 6 p.m. here again at Panorama Village Boardroom. And Monday, September 30th, will be our regular board meeting for the last meeting of the month. That'll be 7 p.m. here at Panorama Village. I'd like to now adjourn the State College Area School District Board of Directors meeting. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.